Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and this week I'm honored and excited to have back on the show for a second time, SRA and mind control survivor, man of God, father, husband, writer and author, international speaker, podcast host, entrepreneur, farmer, military veteran, wilderness mentor, executive protection agent, transport specialist, chef for the homeless, market seller, and linenite, Nathan Reynolds. A little recap of Nathan's testimony in case you missed last time's episode. He was born into a generational incest-based family through the Reynolds bloodline, and from birth was systematically abused, mind-controlled, and mentally fractured to keep his abuse compartmentalized with amnesic barriers. It wouldn't be until later in life and into his marriage that his suspicious past would begin unweaving and unwinding itself, revealing a layered double life checkered with deceit, betrayal, pain, torture, and horrors beyond comprehension, perpetrated on him from the same family, military, government, and community members that were partaking in what Nathan appropriately has coined radically intelligent evil. The last time he was on, we dove into his testimony, his walk with God, the impact his wife, Chelsea, and his children have had on his healing, his book, Snatched from the Flames, One Man's Journey to Uncover the Family Secrets Buried in His Bloodstained Past, and so much more. I highly recommend listening to the episode as it was filled from start to finish with invaluable information and inspiration, and to also follow his YouTube channel at Nathan Reynolds, where you can watch all his other interviews, listen to him read his entire book and the Bible for free in his playlist section, and learn helpful tools about healthier, holistic, and biblical living the way God intended for it to be. This time around on today's episode, we are going to do a deep dive into some nitty-gritty topics Nathan hasn't yet had the opportunity to cover in an interview or podcast, including the Jason groups, Delta military and assassin programming, methods and tactics, what it's like to hunt humans as a highly skilled mind-controlled hitman, redemption through our Lord and Savior, and so much more. This is an episode you do not want to miss with information you won't hear anywhere else. Nathan is an absolute warrior, and we have so much to learn from him and others willing to shine a light on these dark topics. I encourage and ask that you please give Nathan your full attention, and I thank you all who submitted your amazing questions. We are going to answer as many of them as we can today. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to give a couple reminders and an update. If you are a survivor or whistleblower who wants to share your testimony on this podcast or who wants to share any information privately with me, you can email me at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. I also just started a Substack and a Rumble channel you can support as well. All the details in the show notes. And lastly, starting October 1st, we are beginning a Stand By Survivors monthly book club, where each month we will feature and read together a survivor or survivor advocate's book and come together at the end of the month with a group Zoom call with the author of the book that we read that month. Let it be no surprise that Nathan's book, Snatched from the Flames, will be our first featured book, and on Monday, October 30th at 8 p.m. Central Time, everyone who participates in the book club will have the amazing opportunity to sit in on a live Q&A with Nathan over Zoom. The link is in the show notes, and it has all the details and a sign-up link. Please join us and sign up today. It's going to be an amazing time. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming this week's guest of honor, voice for the voiceless, selfless and tireless survivor advocate, promoter of linen and wool, brilliant educator, overcomer, passionate pursuer of truth, and shaker of the Luciferian kingdom, the one and only Nathan Reynolds. Nathan, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Emma, I could not be more fired up to be here. Honestly, it's because people like you are so devoted to bringing forth this absolutely apocalyptic nightmare that is so insidiously infested itself into every arena of our society, that there are bold people rising up, people that have been forced into these closets of cowardice and coercion and control for so long in their life. And they have been waiting for an opportunity to get out of that kingdom, to get out and to be able to come to the light and come to the truth and understand what the heck is going on out there. And then people like you have given people truth, given them an opportunity to speak their truth, given them an opportunity to come out of that place and be free. So thank you, Emma, for doing that. You guys, if you don't watch Emma's podcast, if you've never even heard about Emma, I highly recommend you spending some serious quantities of time exploring all of the information that she has put out there and all the different interviews with survivors and other testimonials and whistleblowers. She is an incredible warrior who has brought forth an boundless critical piece of information so that people can actually get some freedom instead of just continuing to live in this prison of perversion. So thanks for letting me be here, Emma.
It's an honor, and thank you so much. That means so much coming from you. I know I told you before, and I said it on the last interview, but you were a big inspiration for me to even start this podcast. You know, I was fumbling around trying to learn, and you were somebody that I found early on in my journey, and I was so blown away by the power in your voice and your conviction and your strength. And I was like, gosh, if he can put himself out there and talk about these hard, horrible things, then I can come up and at least listen and just help get these stories out. So I can't thank you enough. You know, it's because people like you that people like me can do what I do. So it's a team effort, and I'm so grateful for you, Nathan. And I'm also grateful. I know we're going to be talking about some topics that you don't normally talk about. And I think that this is going to be an incredible learning experience from people. And we had so many awesome questions submitted. I had put out some feelers for the YouTube community, Twitter community. So I want to thank all of you who submitted your questions. Nathan was blown away. I was blown away. And we're probably going to have to break this up into at least a couple episodes, maybe more. But I promise you guys, we're going to try to get through all the questions that applied to the topics that I put out and the ones that Nathan can answer from his experience. There were a few that didn't apply to his life. So we'll have more opportunities to submit questions, but I just want to thank you all. This is going to be an incredible learning experience for all of us. So Nathan, I thought we would get started. One of the things that I don't think a lot of people may know about you, or at least that they don't get to hear you talk about often, are the Jason groups that you were a part of. And that's including me. That's a new topic for me also. I've only actually been able to find a little bit on that. And I actually had a couple of people that submitted questions about it. So I thought maybe if you're okay with that, we'd start there and you could talk about these groups and educate us on it, because this is a group that I don't think comes up enough. And I think it's important that people know about it.
I'm so glad that you're willing to just dive into this, because the Jason, first of all, let me just be real clear. There's two basic broad branches of the Jason projects and the great Jason group. So one is people will associate with Jason groups. So most people will go online and they'll be like, what the heck is this Jason group? And then you're going to find some just basic frontline information about an advisory group of people that were founded in the 1960s that were basically consultants from the scientific community who were designed to set up a form of advisory consultation with the Advanced Research Projects Agency. ARPA is what it was called before, like the founders of the internet that you and I are using right now to communicate. Now modern language is at a defense to that, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. DARPA is what it's called. And these are kind of the agencies for the United States government that do a lot of their spooky sciences and their research into areas that are super classified. And this advisory group was set up so that they could have people that were independent of the defense industry, the military industrial complex. They wanted people that did not have a contractor's background and weren't bought, paid for, and owned by the same government agencies that were trying to figure out and solve these problems. Because when you work with advisory groups, the problem that you run into more often than not is that they have a bias generally with the almighty greediness for gain. And so they thought, who are, for lack of a better word, the gods of society and modernity, which are the scientists, right? There's people that are kind of heralded as these just truly neutral folks who are able to make decisions that are irrelevant of political, socioeconomic, and any other maybe potential influences that might be weighing on them, biases. And so the Jason groups was handpicking out and selecting folks who had a lot of information and expertise in physics. And this was birthed right after the World War II and the beginning of the Cold War era. And so they came, a lot of the scientists were picked out of the Manhattan Project. And for those of you who don't know, the Manhattan Project was the most the most secretive project that has ever taken place in the United States history up until the 1940s and 50s. After World War II, there was a massive push to develop more advanced nuclear weapons, including fission weapons and fusion weapons, and these just different types of devices that could cause greater destructive capacity. And at the time, we had a monopoly on that information, and that was done through an incredible conspiracy of silence, which was the Manhattan Project. And you had a few different major heads of that. Right now, there's a very popular one, which is Robert Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer really didn't last that long into the Cold War season because of someone named Edward Teller. We're going to have a long pause on that guy because he's one of the integral figures in my life who began to vet me out and bring me into what was called the Jason projects, which ends up coming later in the late 80s. And this is specifically a project system that was designed to cultivate and create Jasons that were youth. And it's a curriculum-based system that is built and founded by a guy named Robert Ballard, who was a commander, a retired United States military intelligence officer who worked in the oceanographic, the United States Navy, and the research vessels, people that were diving into the depths of the earth and coming out with all kinds of technologies and devices and things that they don't talk about. And they just say, we're going down and looking for volcanic vents. And when they're really looking for things like nuclear weapons on United States submarines that got dropped and misplaced, or like the Soviets, we were sinking a lot of Soviet nuclear submarines as well. And we were trying to get inside there and open up their vaults and get into their codes and stuff like that. So they were part of a lot of those projects in the military. Well, in 1989, he founded a school curriculum that was for something that was called, what do they call that? Oh, STEM, science, technologies, education, mathematics. Now, if you guys have not seen an episode, Emma recently posted a episode with a guy who goes by Gray, and he broke down a lot of the GATE and talent projects, including STEM, and how the education system is utilized by these advanced military technologies teams and covert agencies, along with religious orders, to cultivate mind-controlled officers and individuals. A lot of the projects that we're going to talk about today have their origins deep inside those. I am not the expert on that by any stretch of the imagination. Gray did one of the best and most thorough jobs going through, detailing, showing, and chronicling a lot of that information. So Jason Learning Project, which is a curriculum that's a nonprofit-based curriculum system that gave birth right around the same time that I came to be on this earth, was really what I got enrolled in and brought into, which was designed to find and extrapolate individuals who had what's called polymath, basically geniuses in a variety of topics and arenas. They could learn information and assimilate information and then apply that information in many different fields. And so polymaths are generally like the main goal of what people are looking for in order to recruit them into these other projects, and specifically into assassination programs, Delta programs, because they have the ability to think and adapt quickly, which is like one of the main characteristics of somebody who's going to go into being spy, covert agencies. Anybody who wants to operate within that, they need to be able to be autonomous. They need to be able to learn quickly. They need to be able to adapt and overcome situations where they do not have any backup, any resources, and any capacity to communicate with anybody who might be in their team. Generally, this is the hallmark characteristics of what you see in these Jason projects. Now, if you dive back into the kind of normalized history of the Jason projects, they were working in a lot of the missile defense systems and the ballistic, nuclear programs where they were trying to deliver bombs into very, very targeted places all across the world. So that was kind of the beginning of it. They met for 6 weeks every summer in La Jolla, California, and along the East Coast. They had different places where they would meet and gather. But in the beginning, it was really a formative collection of people that were like, we just want to be autonomous. We don't want to have to answer to anybody. We can choose which projects we take on, and we're going to solve problems. So people would come to them with issues like, we wanted to find a way to stop the Vietnamese delivering supplies from North Vietnam into Southern Vietnam, and they wanted to cut off that supply route. And so they developed a sensor barrier, basically, of landmines and communication technology, so that they could figure out, were people carrying weapons, were they transporting troops, were they bringing supplies across the Ho Chi Minh Trail in through Laos and into South Vietnam, and they wanted to be able to shut that down. And so the Jasons were brought in order to consolidate, hey, how can we fix that problem? And so they would put a report out, not necessarily always field testing stuff, but they would occasionally go into the field and do experimentation on that. And so what happened is, during that season, the Jason's project got brought into what's called the Phoenix program. And this is one where it is a direct, overt assassination program. The Phoenix program was built and designed to assassinate individuals who might be subservient agents of the Northern Vietnamese, the NVA, people that were in southern Vietnam who were acting as double agents. It was a whole scale training campaign to teach people how to do assassination, torture, extraction, and infiltration, that led to the deaths of anywhere from 400,000 to 800,000. If you go and investigate a little more carefully, the guys who were actually a part of it, the estimates are closer to 6 million people that were directly killed and slaughtered by these individuals. And so that Phoenix program is what gave birth to a lot of the assassination and training protocols that were then brought in to the youth in the late 70s and early 80s. And that's really where a lot of my impetus and experience began, was right there in the late 80s.
Wow. So this group has been around for a while, and it's more or less evolved. Do you know if it's still called the Jason groups today, or did the name
Yes.
change? Yeah.
Nope, it's still active today. They're still they're well past, almost 50 years now that they've been almost 60 years that they are still operating. One of the longest standing advisory groups that's in existence. Back in 2001, they had a feud with DARPA, regarding the DARPA wanting to force them to choose certain members. Jason's basically operated in this manner that nobody can become a Jason unless the Jasons kind of all agree that they are going to bring them in. People have at the root, and the question is, what does Jason mean? It's not a name like a person. It's often ascribed to that in modern nomenclature. People will refer to themselves. There's a book on the history of this that's definitely pertinent information. This was put out by Anne.
Oh.
This is a great history of it, which was Anne Finkenberner's book. This is called The Jasons, The Secret History of the Sciences Post-War Elite. And she is someone who spent a great deal of time interviewing and gives a lot of firsthand accounts of what the Jasons were actually up to. And I highly recommend, for those of you guys that want to actually investigate this more, this is one of the best books that you can read to just familiarize yourself with this. This is obviously what's called a sanitized history, meaning that there's nothing that's classified information that's put in here, nor is there information that would necessarily jeopardize any active or previous projects that are in that gray zone before they've been leaked. So I say that to basically tell you this is the history according to the mainstream, and also what the Jasons would approve on having disclosed. So you have to read through the lines of it. And one of the best pertinent things that she described in here just made me chuckle, because for those of you guys that haven't read my book, there's a lot of times where I write in the third person, or I communicate as if I'm in the third person, which means I use like I, instead of using I, me, or I instead will say we or they or us. And that's because there is a plurality of understanding that there's like a group think that goes on in the minds of people that have dissociative identity disorder, people that have been fractured and dissociated into different separate compartmentalized personalities in order to be able to participate in, on one side of it, something that's a top secret government project, and on the other side of it, just a normal like high school, like going through your Monday to Friday like regular life situation. And so there's massive compartmentalization of that, and that all that patterning came into play specifically in the modernity in the 1940s and 1950s with things that people like to talk about, MK Ultra, Project Bluebird, and a lot of Project Artichoke, Project Naomi, all these other kind of things that were brought to fruition. She doesn't go into any aspect of the mind control components of it. However, she deals with the components of it that have been declassified. But she even says that the origins of the name have to do with the Greek mythology of people that Jason and the Argonauts, which is this whole great conquest with Jason and a bunch of these other guys who are going on a mission to try to recover this golden fleece that was guarded by a dragon. And so this is what is generally patterned and programmed into individuals at a very young age, is this quest for the golden fleece. Generally, that can be your pearl that everyone's chasing, right? A money, accolades, great. Or you're chasing the dragon, you're trying to destroy the dragon, which is obviously on the cover of my book, the major target that I'm going after every day and night, because it says very simply that we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. We're in a cosmic war here that has eternal consequences, because there are real immortals that are battling with us, a restless evil, a radical, intelligent evil that puts on human skin suits and operates through human agents in order to accomplish and overcome and devour the lives of the people all around it. And they literally must feed on the lives of people, the blood, literally the blood. And so this is why these death cults get so pervasive and saturated with this. Now, the Jasons try to be purely scientific, so they don't go into any religious components of their life and history of it. But the Jasons are self-identified as always referring to themselves as me and we and theys. And this is something that befuddled her as she's writing the book, because she didn't have a category for that. It kind of was one of those like, this is the introduction. She says, Jason is usually capitalized. Jason, as though it were an acronym. I have no idea why. Maybe because it's written like a name. It might be taken to be a personal name. I shall not capitalize it, partly because the pages are already full of acronyms, and partly because writing its name implies the reality. That is, Jason's talk as though Jason is a separate person. Their pronouns of choice for Jason are not for first person, we, but third person, they or it. They talk as though Jason were a sort of collective organism. But from the first minute I heard those ground rules, I understood I was going to have to get a sense of the collective without ever seeing it function. Even without the ground rules, the classification of their meetings meant I couldn't watch them work together. I would have to reconstruct the collective by talking to individuals to show Jason through Jasons. And this is the fundamental architecture of how the Jasons operate, in that they are autonomous assets who are fielded into society, into their arenas of expertise, and they are not necessarily interworking. Like, they're not a network team, if that makes sense. They don't operate with a, like, let's pick up the phone and all call each other. A lot of times they operate in such a fashion that they are lone wolves, that they go out and they do what their expertise is, whatever arena that might currently captivate those individuals. They're going to be becoming expertise and rising within that field, no matter where they go. Every place they plug into, they're going to rise to the cream of the crop. And this gives them the ability to then come back together on occasion and communicate what's been going on and give consultation and advice. Where a lot of the Jason scholastic programs came in, like myself, where I was enrolled into this program back in the in late 89. I was born allegedly in 1988. And so I'm 34 years old right now. And when I first came into being, my family didn't have a maybe a my family's intent with me in the beginning was not necessarily to go after the military projects. The way it worked in my family was that the shattering, the fracturing, the trauma, the conditioning was used to fulfill the old religion. So there's two basic breakdowns. There's a family, I call it the family, which I'm referring to as like the old religion, people that are born, that are in the generational Warcraft style of blackmail, extortion, corroboration, calling upon these dark powers in order to enact their will and to be able to control people. The priest class, it's a better way to just say it. It's the priest class people. The network would be like the government, the military industrial complex. This would be the people that are interconnected within the system of normal society in a sense. Those two groups are not always collaborative. More often than not, they're competitive. And so my family had been raising up people within the family, within the old religion order of it. And because of that, when they create mind controlled slave, when they create assets, they don't want to get those people taken into the network unless they're already pre-patterned and conditioned and placed within there, so that they can feed and continue to give the family what it wants, which is access to classified information, so that they can make better business deals. They want to be able to control the information, and they know they have to literally raise up agents to infiltrate that and then be able to be placed within there to be a good spy, to bring that information back. So you have continual war going back and forth between these two groups, in that they know each side is always trying to get and extract information and be able to control each other through blackmail. And so I got raised up in what is the Jesuit path of assassination programs, which is really reliant on people going after individuals who are like oath keepers and secret society members who are enacting this dark order religion on the earth. So I can branch into a lot of different lanes between those two, Emma. I know you've got some really good poignant questions, and I want to make sure to circle back to those questions because I think they'll provide us a really good structure for where we can go from here. And yeah, let's do that.
I was gonna ask, are there how most secret societies, because obviously there's an allegiance that they expect, are there oaths, or how do they keep people captivated in a sense, or not speaking out against the group or getting out of it?
What a great question. Y'all need to talk about oath keeping societies here for a second. Let's just do that. Okay, because this is incredibly critical. And I think for most people as they go through life, they don't have any category for how people are willing to be so insane. Like they genuinely can't comprehend it. And so because it doesn't fit a category of like their normal waking day-to-day life, they don't think it's reality. And it's a lot more, it's a lot easier to swallow the pill that this is just some kind of outside, insane, crazy conspiracy style thing. Like, I don't even want to look at it. It's a lot of ostrich syndrome. It's basically rooted in the fear that just pervades our society and has been conditioned to people from a very young age. It's like, it's too dark. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to address it. And I'd rather just not know about it, which is like 40 to 50% of the people that come across me, they're like, I don't even want to know about that stuff. Let me just go shove my head back in the sands. It's the sweet, comfortable sands of ignorance and go on with my life as if nothing I just heard is reality. And so that is the major thing you're kind of constantly battling with humans, is a struggle for them to be able to shake that paradigm so you have to shake that box. You have to shake your paradigm up. And a lot of people just would rather not. They just want to go back to their life. They just want to wait for that 401k, and they want to wait for their social security check. They want to just get to that life. They've been waiting their whole life for this American dream to come to reality, and not understanding that you're already asleep and you're basically dead. You're the walking dead every day that you continue to ignore the radical intelligent evil that's stalking all around you, because this stuff is an absolute tenet of our society. In order to enlist in the United States military, you literally go through this thing called MEPS, which is like their medical processing system. You're going to have all kinds of batteries of tests done to you to find out physically what's going on with your body, what you're capable of doing. Like just even the vision test will determine whether or not you're capable of being an Apache AH-64 attack helicopter pilot, or whether you can even handle being an F-35 pilot. Like there's all these different things that you're doing: sight and sound and touch and taste and smell, sensory deprivation. And you're going to be doing all these physical exams of your body. And then there's questionnaires, because you got a bunch of psychologists who all their job is to do psych profiles on people. And so those same kind of MEPS, that same kind of standardization of finding and evaluating everybody that comes through those doors, have all been brought into basic clinicians' office, doctors' offices, school psychologists, counselors' offices, standardized testing. And that's been implemented within the same structure of our public education system, and also in the gifted and talented education system, in order to find out where and identify people that could be potentially advantageous for the family or the network. And so these oath-keeping societies have in their core tenets a swearing of those oaths. When you enlist and you pass your MEPS test and you sign up for, whatever branch, if you're going into the Coast Guard, you're going to the Marines, the Navy, the Air Force, the Army, you're going to be sworn in, and you swear an oath of allegiance. I swear to defend this country from all enemies, foreign and domestic, like into this long list of an oath. So help me God at the very end of it. And you're literally standing and swearing over your heart. It is like a blood covenant that you're entering into, whether you understand it or not. It's a spiritual soul tie that you're yoking yourself to whatever deity or entity that's being invoked over the ceremony. So like you are binding yourself by mutual imprecation, which is the same thing that these fallen angels and all this other kingdom stuff got all wrapped up in. This is literally where we get this word Hermon. Mount Hermon, this place where people make and bound these oaths together with these B'nai Elohim, these mighty ones. These people call them fallen angels. Other people might want to call them like aliens or whatever else. But these are outside entities that chose extra dimensional beings that chose to enter them, change themselves, and fit this figure and form to come down and reveal the secrets of heaven, to reveal to people how you could dial the phone book of these other realms in order to get access to knowledge, to information that would otherwise be bound up and restrained from people having that. And so the Jesuits, which was the form of what my grandfather was, he was a Fourth Order Knights of Columbus down in Lake Havasu City, Arizona, still active and engaged in his filthy works down there. And he was someone who patterned me so that I would be an enforcer of these oaths. And this is really what the Jesuits are. They are like the militant arm of the Pope. Okay, there is a black pope, there is a gray pope, and a white pope. And these three individuals are some of the most powerful and omnipotent, for lack of a better word, individual players on the earth. The black pope is somebody not by color, but by designation of his duties, is the procurer of black gold, currency of this kingdom of darkness. Somebody that is overseeing all of these black robed priests, which are Jesuits. And their predominant function in society is to be disruptors and usurpers of information, to be infiltrators. And so their extreme oath of the Jesuits, I should just read you a component of it, because I'm not going to read the entire thing because it's just completely filled with all kinds of just invocation of other things. But the extreme oath is, oh man, hold on a second.
No worries. Thank you for doing this.
Sorry. Yeah.
This will be good for people to hear.
Yeah. And this is published in the Library of Congress. Hold on, I got to wait. My children just walked in. This is obviously one of those things that I don't. That's okay. I love you all. This is definitely not the time to. Y'all have a great night. This is my dad life. And I'm trying to wage an extremely crazy, wild, and intense war, all the while still raising a family, which is quite complicated. I'll just be real honest with you. Exactly. And it's the hardest thing I've ever done. Full disclosure. You sit here and you're like, I used to travel in an RV full time, and so I couldn't really have these conversations because I lived like with cardboard walls, and it was definitely not something I've wanted. I don't want my children necessarily understanding the full level of depravity of the entire systemic evil that's in the earth. Yet, it's not that I want to keep that from them. I don't want to keep that from them forever, but there's a level of innocence that should be guarded with our children as much as we can, as long as we can, until we have to explain to them the mechanics of how the system of evil works. But until that time, I'd rather not read the extreme oath of the Jesuits in their presence.
Yeah, I
So,
don't.
these are so what happened, you guys, is there was a massive revolt trying to bust loose all of these oath-keeping societies back in the 15th century, 16th century. People were trying to kick these people out of their countries. The very Vatican themselves literally banned it. Pope Clement, I believe the fourth, banned the Jesuits, disbanded them, shut them down because they were so disruptive and so toxic that they shut them down. And this is the same with the Bavarian Illuminati. These are guys who just all they do is infiltrate and sow in chaos and discord everywhere they go and confusion. And they generally do that through two main militant arms, the military and astronomy. And so that's where the sciences all come in, and we're going to get there. Hold on, I'm having a hard time finding this for a second. Just give me one moment.
You're good. Take your time.
Okay, here's just, I'll just read a component of it. I do further promise and declare that I will, when opportunity presents, make and wage relentless war secretly and openly against all heretics, Protestants, and Masons, as I am directed to do, to extirpate them from the face of the whole earth, and that I will spare neither age, sex, nor condition, that I will hang, burn, waste, boil, flay, strangle, and bury alive these infamous heretics, rip up their stomachs and wombs of their women, and crush their infants' heads against the walls in order to annihilate their execrable race. That when the same cannot be done openly, I will secretly use the poisonous cup, the strangulation cord, the steel of the poniard, or the leaden bullet, regardless of the honor, rank, dignity, or authority of the persons, whatever may be their condition in life, either public or private, as I at any time may be directed to do so by any agents of the Pope or superior of the Brotherhood of the Holy Father of the Society of Jesus. So this is, for lack of a better term, the explicit foundations of these oath-keeping societies, and what is the core tenet within the assassination training and protocols is they take this pattern of devotion and compulsion to obey orders with this absolute militant. There's only three ways, there's only three motivating factors that anyone is generally a target for assassin programming or for training, and that's somebody who's motivated politically, religiously, or by revenge. Any other major motivating factor is not going to be as fruitful in the end because of the proclivity that people have to resist the art of, maybe not the art, to resist killing other people. We are hardwired innately to not want to kill people. And there's a great book which is called On Killing. And it was written by a colonel in the United States military who is trying to analyze the psychological resistance and how to break down the psychological resistance of human beings, mankind, from killing each other. Because if you actually study war, if you actually study conflict, battles, people who could hit each other, shoot each other, kill each other, stab each other tend not to. And in fact, like they analyze things like battlefield forensics to determine how many times people they used to just line soldiers up and just stand in front of each other. People have seen this in Revolutionary War and Civil War, where they're like, yeah, they just stand in lines and stand there and shoot each other. And you're like, why aren't the casualties way higher? They're standing sometimes 50 feet apart and they're all shooting at each other with weaponry that could easily hit out to 100 yards consistently. It wasn't that there was no need for it. And they were finding that only 5 to 10% of the time people were actually shooting each other. And in fact, people were consistently aiming to miss because that resistance factor to kill people increases as you get closer and closer and closer. And so this is what's called the intimacy of killing and the resistance that's hardwired into somebody. Somebody that's willing to use a firearm at a long distance, like somebody, say a sniper, who is looking through the scope up close at somebody, is going to have a different level of intimacy and resistance to killing somebody as they're watching them eat their lunch, as they're watching them drink a cup of water, talk to their friend. It humanizes them if they're up close and personal. If they're a long ways off and you're an artilleryman and all you do is pull a string and launch an artillery shell, the resistance, the internal resistance factor is mitigated. Same thing for somebody who is flying up overhead and opening up a bomb bay doors and just carpet bombing an area. They have a less and a decreasing amount of resistance versus coming all the way in towards an intimate killing of shooting somebody that you can see sweat on their face, reactions in their bodies, up close into personal, like what is truly the intimate form of killing, which is where you're using knives, where you're using tools like this, edged weapons, blunt weapons, trauma, physical hands. Like the most effective way to kill another person when you're barehanded truly is using your thumb to go through their eye into their brain and to turn their off button really quickly. However, when you actually try to study and find out how many people are willing to do that, very, very few times does that ever happen, because the resistance that we have to gouging out somebody else's eyes, plucking somebody's eyes out, is so high in us that you have to then you have to break that out of people. You have to shatter that and compartmentalize that off. You have to completely disintegrate a person's internal resistance to create what would be, people would say, a psychopath, a sociopath, somebody that has zero resistance to that killing, and to be willing to do that. And the way you've got to do that, you got to find somebody that's going to be one of those 3 motivational factors that is so ingrained in them as a baseline, that then you can bring in the assassination training and programming in order to get them there. And so the Jesuit model for assassins and for the intelligence array that works by it, that is what has been extrapolated out to every other agency and group, because it's the longest standing intelligence group, and the largest and most effective one that exists on the planet today is the one that comes from the Holy Roman Empire.
Wow, that's fascinating. To me, it's interesting just how one thought process, in a sense, can be interchange so many different ways between these groups, but really it's like the same motive that they have, but a different way to skin the cat, in a sense, just a different point of view depending on what group that is. And so the Jesuit group, that was within your family. And then how did the Jason group, who was first initiated into that? Because I know you said it has to be sort of an invite only. Was that generations that were in your lineage that were being initiated into that group, and so then you were invited? Or how did that end up being a part of your family as well?
So on my mother's side, like my grandfather on my mother's side is the one I'm basically talking about for that side of it. They were all based in Southern California, and the Stanford Research Institute is one of the hotbeds of a lot of this activity. And this is where the founders and the builders and architects of Lake Havasu City. If you go back and watch Emma and I's interview, also, and even a better one where I broke down a lot of the history of Lake Havasu City and went into a lot of the founders and their interconnectedness, was an interview I did with Eyes on the Right podcast, Amy Roper. And so if you guys want to check that out, it'll help bridge a lot of the information that I'm just going to kind of highlight and skip right over right now, just for brevity's sake. But what happened is they would meet, the Jasons would meet in these they would meet in school. Basically, what happened is in the 1986, there was a meeting that the Jasons were doing at girls' boarding schools, the Catholic boarding schools. And so these facilities were really easy to infiltrate and then put listening devices in and plant agents within that. And so the Jesuits were able to do that. And so what happened is they were able to determine how the Jasons operate and then start to infiltrate its members and its societies in order to place their own membership within there, because the Jesuits are some of the preeminent cadre of the social sciences and of the academia. And so they were able to position themselves so that they could get recruited. Now, each of these Jasons have their own family. They have wives, children, especially when the nuclear family was still a normalcy within our society. And so the families, the wives and the children would all come to La Jolla, California for their regular gatherings. And this gave access to information where they were doing what they called junior Jason programming or junior Jason training. And so the children and the wives were given their own briefings or programming, for lack of a better word, that allowed them to be able to make sure that the children and the wives were also getting this compartmentalized, secreted information, but that they were also testing to evaluate whether or not that information was being leaked out by any of their dads. Later on, women were also brought into the Jason programs. I think there's only like 6% of the women in the history of Jason. So it's a much less common number. But those were the times where basically the Knights of Columbus and the Jesuits finally tapped into that program. It may have happened previously. That's the only one that I really know about where it kind of got brought in. And so the United States military was interested in cultivating what's called an X project. And I have this, you guys, is another book that I can't recommend enough, which is called The Black Awakening, which is written by Russ Dizdar. And this is on the rise of the satanic super soldier. And he goes into a lot more of the references and documentation of the various groups, their own books and research that is put out by it. But they, let me see here on page. Russ calls these individuals that are involved in this the chosen ones, and we'll get back into that. Just give me 1 second here. There's one individual. Robert Comer was one of the founding architects of the Phoenix program. And so he was someone who then was partnered with to establish what was the X class project. And this was basically, they tried to take all of the information that they were accumulating and getting from the Phoenix program and launch something that was called Project Pegasus, which was an entire other iteration of assassination and covert operations work here in the United States. And they needed a team of people to consult on building out that framework. This is when the Jasons got brought in a major and intimate way to be able to start to bridge the gap of how do we have a scientific methodology towards educating and training up an entire different generation of this so that we can have our own homegrown assassins here in the United States that were not a part of necessarily the religious family network. And they wanted to be able to bridge that gap through them. And so the X-class projects were basically, they would take children through this ritual mind control and to the fracturing and the deprogramming, the weaponization of hypnotism. And then they would start to see, okay, what accolades do they have and how can we then place them within the cadres of these other groups and other agencies. And so this took time, and this took a person who came into my life that ended up bringing me into this, which was Edward Teller. And he was one of the key components of the Jason projects all the way back from the 1950s. He's the people what would call the father of the atomic bomb, or father of the hydrogen bomb. And he was a Hungarian refugee who came over here seeking asylum in a sense. And he was adamantly devoted to the weaponization of everything he could get. He was really committed to seeing the United States have absolute superiority in every arena of what is called total war. Total war is where there is no holds barred, no rules, no Geneva Convention, no, like, this is philosophically the justification for recruiting men, women, and children to fight your wars. Okay. When a country is under such a threat, when a continent, when a society is going to be eradicated, morality, as they view it, can be completely thrown out the window. And this is how the fastest, most effective way to drive a social engineering campaign is through war. And what happened and what took place through the World War II and then the Cold War was a prolonged dread of imminent, absolute, total destruction. And so much of the brainchild of these projects was birthed during a time when people genuinely believed that there was going to be a nuclear exchange, a thermonuclear exchange, and everybody on the surface of the earth was going to die. And so because of that, this became the moral justification for use of the worst kind of humans ruining humans in order to fight back against humans ruining humans. It was the justification for the greater good. You can do anything that is required for the defense of the country. And Edward Teller was somebody who I got introduced to because in the mid 1990s, I did an assassination down in Phoenix, Arizona, involving a diplomat, a foreign diplomat who was bringing over a plutonium-based power atomic battery. And what this was in the form of is what was produced by a company called Medtronic. And there was another one. There was a few different companies producing them at the time back in the 1940s and 50s. And this is plutonium-238 is a type of element that's created in the cyclotron. Basically, when they smash atoms together and when they produce nuclear energy from uranium-238 going through a nuclear reactor, there's all these other isotopes that are created. Those isotopes have different properties, one of them being neptunium, which is a superconductor at room temperature. A superconductor is something that you can take non-magnetic materials, so not just like iron or steel, which is something that we're familiar with being able to be magnetized and float above another magnet, but you can have non-magnetic materials float over another object. Normally, you cannot do this except by cooling something down to absolute zero. This is why liquid nitrogen, if you cool stuff down to liquid nitrogen, you can get it to float over these conductors. Well, a room temperature superconductor is the absolute dream of all of the sciences in the metamaterials world. That is created in very small amounts during nuclear chain reactions when uranium-238 is being used in a nuclear reactor. So that is a very short-used component that has then been completely buried down into the deep military sciences and the deep underground military bases, because that's what they use to build their infrastructure in the underground arenas. And the deep underground military bases needed a way of transporting around everyone because they were preparing for an imminent destruction of everyone on the surface. So they built an entire world, an entire country that operates still to this day and night underneath our feet. And it's really a strange paradigm for people to get their heads around it. But you have to understand that they needed something that's called a continuity of government, that they needed a second government that was operating continually in case all of the politicians, every single senator and congressman, all of the military leaders, all the joint chiefs of staff, the secretary of defense, the secretary of state, in case everyone was killed suddenly in a nuclear war, they needed a way to be able to continue on instantly during the events that might have taken place. So there's industry. I mean, there's entire civilization that operates beneath our feet. That civilization built itself on these metamaterials that are not released publicly to us up here on the surface because they classify us as people that don't have a need for these technologies. Neptunium is the single most important element in that underground projects world because you can build your engines, you can build your craft and your vehicles to transport and move around without any need for semiconductors. Like in this battery, there's circuitry and semiconductors that are based off of silicon. You don't need that if the entire body of your vehicle is made out of the superconductor. So if you build a train out of Neptunium, the entire train itself is a circuit board and it can communicate, and you don't have any need for any of these components. You don't have any needs for the amount of energy that's produced. It is one of the key most components. And so plutonium-238 is another byproduct of that chain reaction that comes off of it. And plutonium is a metal that is incredibly useful. However, it's very radioactive. And this is a really key tenet of all of this, is that there is a massive cover up towards what radiation actually does to the human body versus what radiation does not do. And so back when all of these metamaterials were being developed and utilized, people understood that you could block and shield against them without causing any major harm. It's only towards the latter times in the 60s and 70s that they made out a lot of these nuclear weapons and a lot of these nuclear isotopes to be dangerous and hazardous and that they could cause great harm. So we needed to seal them up and lock them away so that nobody else had access to them. The core main reasoning to that was to avoid limitless energy, which is what these things offer. Plutonium-238 is a rock, for lack of a better word, is a metal that is always hot. It is always hot. It's 800 degrees Celsius, and you can use that to generate electricity through a steam powered, just the same thing that we all use to generate electricity to this day, which is steam. All nuclear power plant does, you guys, is make hot water. That's all this stuff does, that makes steam that then turns a turbine that then produces electricity. That's all a nuclear reactor does. It's nothing different than a coal-powered one except for its source of energy. And so back in the mid-90s, I was being tasked to go after certain targets that I was made to believe had some of these metamaterials. And so one of those individuals was a diplomat who had one of these pacemakers installed. They take plutonium-238 and they create what's called a radioisotope thermal generator. And so you can generate electricity just from temperature differences. So if you got something that's super hot on one side and you got something that's not hot on the other side of it, you can create a current. Now it's very inefficient, so you're not getting a lot of the power potential that's there, but it never turns off and there's no moving parts. So it was being used as pacemakers. It was also being used for atomic batteries in other technology, specifically that was being utilized in the tradecraft, the spy world. And so I was sent after a target that was down in the United States or in the Phoenix Capitol building in order to assassinate them and to extract this component, this pacemaker, from their heart. And after I did that, when I was coming out of the facility, I was captured on CCTV footage, and I was a child at the time, 9 years old, and I was not supposed to exist. This is a really key component of all of this, you guys. If the major reason that children assassins are not talked about is because it would unlock Pandora in the realm of this, one of the most important state secrets in the United States, which is that these are the main tenets of our society's clandestine operatives, are people that are under the age of 18 years old. They have the most autonomy in our country. They are able to get around and be looked over better than anybody else. Once you are viewed to be a potential threat as you age or as you mature, people tend to look at you and scrutinize you very differently. But children are physically capable of getting into places that other people can't, because they're generally considered to be innocent in our society as a whole. And that allows them one of the greatest camouflages an assassin can have, which is anonymity, which is being in the kingdom of the great, that your background noise continually. And so when I got captured on that CCTV footage, people wanted the technology of what I had, but more so they wanted access to me. And so my family, my military handler at the time, his name's Richard Allen. He's not black, he's white. And he was more so, he was a dentist in the United States military, which gave him access to a lot of the drugs that are needed for amnesia and for ritualistic fracturing and abuse. And he was transient going in and out of the United States and over into Germany. And my family, he was my family's military handler. He was the one who was vetting me out to military groups and being able to kind of position me to be able to get into these military groups, because they realized sooner or later I was going to get on their radar and I was going to have to go into those groups. Well, after I got captured on that footage, this is when the Jason projects, now this is the school version, the scholastic version of it, recruited me into their programming, because they realized there was no way around it, that the military was going to scoop me up and I was going to be utilized in these projects. And I needed to now have an opportunity to still feed that information back to them. So they structured me into this X-class weapons training system so that I could go ahead and gather intelligence on how other families, other military groups were creating their own assassins. And then I was designed to then feed that information back into the family so they could use that for their own gains and goods.
Fascinating. That's information we definitely haven't talked about on this podcast, and I appreciate you going deep into that, because this information is hard to come by. Not a lot of people are talking about it, like what we said, and that is a very hard reality for people to accept. Not just that we live in a child abuse society and that there are projects designed to fracture and abuse children, but to understand what these children are being used for and to the depths of it. And that, they're literally using kids, like how you said, to do these clandestine operations involving murder and just these really horrific things that even as adults, is really hard to comprehend going through as an adult, much less considering as a kid. So I wanted to ask you, because I want to talk more about the programming side of this and what that entails from your experiences. But for people who might be newer or maybe confused or just not able to comprehend, in a sense, what the fracturing of the mind is, could you talk a little bit about that process of how trauma is induced on a child? And then that will help kind of guide us into the programming side of it and how they, layer that on as the years go on.
So for those of you who are wanting to understand how fracturing or splitting of a mind, how that's utilized in order to facilitate this creation of alternate identities, children, when they're born, are when children are born, they don't have a pattern set and established yet. They're very much open to information, and they have not consolidated and formulated who they're going to be, their personality, their identity, their character. And so they're easier to pattern into a specific subset, meaning different varieties of personalities, core beliefs, where you need somebody who is willing to live a life of absolute duplicity, meaning they are completely committed to a set of standards on one side, and they're absolutely committed to a completely opposite set of standards on the other side. Hi, honey. Yes. My flashlight. Hi. That's my big reason why, you guys, I'm talking about any of this stuff, is because I did not think I was ever going to have children. I never thought I would have an opportunity to raise up another generation, but I came out against this stuff because I was adamantly committed to making sure that this did not happen to my children. And because of that, it initiated an absolute war that was inevitable to guard my children from having done to them what was done to me. The way that this is done to children is through systemic, consistent abuse: physical, psychological, sexual, emotional, spiritual abuse. You have to completely destabilize, disrupt, and disorganize the essence of what makes a child innocent. So you have to find the things, the methods of custom catering abuse to the child. So this is when, in the very beginning and formative years, electric shock is introduced, severe screaming, scares, fright, trauma, disruption, The child never knows anything stable in their life except when the programmer or the handler authorizes it, except when they handle it. And so this is really done through what's called behavior modification. If you want to understand the origins of where all this comes from on the scientific side of it, you have to study the origins of the behaviorism movement and going all the way back into the tenets of Skinner, B.F. Skinner, and these people who believe that a human was basically like an animal, and you could condition an animal through stimulus and response, through pressure and release. And so through major application of pressure, meaning physical or sexual abuse, the child is forced to make a decision whether to split, cognitively dissociate is the word that we have. Basic dissociation operates on a pendulum between, like, let's just say a 1 for 10 for reference. Even it's a known term where if anybody has been driving around on the highway in the same route that you've taken day after day after day after day, and you suddenly realize you're back home and maybe you don't really remember all of the driving tasks that was involved along the way. And that's a basic, super common form of dissociation that might take place because you've done a task so many times. Your body might go through the functions, but your mind may be able to wander into all kinds of other areas and other places. And then suddenly your body is doing a very physically complicated task that when you first started out in life was really difficult and you couldn't ever imagine not paying attention while you were driving down the road. However, over time and over use, you're able to get used and familiar with it. So you're able to dissociate, for lack of a better word. And I believe dissociation is a hardwiring survival mechanism that was given to us by our creator to help us survive things that are outside of the parameters of any normal situation in life that are critically needed in order to overcome and adapt to a situation where you're physically, mentally, and emotionally incapable of surviving by processing and taking in all that information. Like somebody who's going through a horrific car crash who suddenly wakes up into the hospital, even though they were conscious during the entirety of the event. Their mind has stored that data, that information into a trauma neural network. And that is what's a compartmentalized area of their body that is holding a piece of information that the rest of their psyche, their soul, their mind, their will, their emotions, their intellect, their desires may not have any recollection or connection with anymore. There is a splitting between those two realms. And so in order to create a mind-controlled slave, in order to create somebody who is split personalities, you got to start when they are young, and generally but from birth to 3 years old, sometimes between birth and 6 or 7 years old, generally is about the latest that you find where you can truly depattern and destabilize the mind to split the consciousness of the individual because they can't fight back. They're put in situations where they physically cannot fight back, whether they're being sodomized, being abused. They physically can't overcome their abusers, and then they can't run. So there's three main components that mankind has to respond: fight, flight, or freeze. Those are the three main components. Fight and flight, once those are ruled out, they have the last component, which is to freeze. And that's really where dissociation enters in. If they don't split, they'll die. And that literally is what happens. People's hearts will give out because of the horror and the trauma of what they're physically going through. And a lot of people at that stage is when they do die. If they're going to die, they're going to generally die in these very early formative years of it. And that is a type of death that they will then cover up through all of the other mechanisms that are built into their society: sudden infant death syndrome and accidental death, drowning, all these other areas that they use to cover this up. But when a child endures that and does split their personality, now what has happened is the core, meaning the main core tenet of their personality, is no longer present. And what happens is they have like a blank slate. It's like you're dealing with a brand new baby again, a brand new person who is completely checked out. This is something that somebody would experience if you've ever been around people in true shock when they've had a major catastrophic injury, they've lost a lot of blood. The body shunts blood to the core organs of the body. And so all the prefrontal cortex shuts down. That's like your higher critical thinking, like what you and I are using right now to communicate and form sentences and think logically. All of that stuff shuts down, and just the core, more emotional components of the brain are left, right? Like people would say like the middle components of the brain, which is where emotion and memory are regulated. And that's the area of the brain where programming is designed to function and work. The United States military does this through sleep deprivation and through destabilization. They're trying to recreate the fracturing process in order to access that core section of the brain in order to program in the information for how to survive and become a trained murderer, even though those resistances are built in and hardwired. And you're an adult by the time you join the military, generally 17 years old. I went in as a junior in high school and got emancipated to the United States military. Most people by then have that formalized personality, and so it's not as easy to depattern them. So the military has spent the greatest amount of time and money and research in order to figure out how to do that to adults. When it's done through the religious order, the occult aspect is what's brought in to help facilitate it. This is where demons are brought in. This is where other spirits, incantations, ancient languages, and twilight languages are being invoked over the individual so that other powers are then being put into that personality, into that component to help facilitate this conspiracy of silence, to facilitate greater power, like you see possessed in Legion, children that are able to do these mighty and physical acts because they're possessed by these disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, the offspring of the Watchers and women that came down in the days of Noah. Those spirits are what help to facilitate a lot of this. But when it's just more the scientific component of it, the child is then put through a series of repatterning where mind control triggers are built in. This is where the Greek lettering system based off of brainwave information is being used as a weapon: alpha, beta, gamma, delta, theta, all the way down into omega. And so one of the first tenets that's placed into that other personality is what's called omega programming, wherein the individual personality will commit suicide, will do everything in its power to kill themselves if ever a series of code words or phrases are used or the individual fails in a given task. And so this is something that you see even in modernity, where we have these lone wolf serial killers or assassins or mass shooters who then kill themselves at the end of it. Why do they always try to kill themselves? Like James Holm, who was people called the Joker, the Batman killer, back in Colorado, Denver, Colorado, an area called Aurora. He was somebody who was under the influence of CIA mind control. One of the former heads of the CIA psychology unit was his therapist at the time. And when he was found outside of the theater after committing, this mass shooting during the premiere of The Dark Knight in Aurora, he was found by police officers trying to pull the trigger on a gun under his chin over and 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 over again. That's the Omega programming taking over to try to eliminate a loose end, which would be the assassin. And so when that doesn't take place, generally they're then in modernity, they're chemically castrated when they go into the jail, the prison system. They brainwash them back out and make them out to be these cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, crazy loony people to character assassinate any testimony they might put forward. This is like evident with the Timothy McVeigh and any of these others who they pegged as these lone wolf individuals. This is what's critically built in anytime programming is done. You have to put the safeguard in. You need to put the nuclear bomb at the very end of the line so that you can clear away all the evidence. This is what's a self-destruct sequence that's put into any advanced piece of technology, which is what that little pacemaker unit that I was pulling out, that's why people were wanting that, because they wanted to be able to install that kind of technology inside of their assassins so that without them knowing it, the Omega could trigger that through their own protocol so that they could self-destruct and have a battery bank that's going to last all the way through from the day they're born to the end of their life. And so this technology ended up getting miniaturized until it got into very, very small size components that were injectable. And ultimately, that's kind of the side of technology that we are in now.
Thank you so much for that. You do a really good job breaking that down. I know even for me, when I first started learning about this, that was one of the hardest things. It's still hard because it's not something that I've personally experienced to dissociate to that level and to have these types of traumas inflicted on me. So I understand how it can be really confusing to people, but understanding that piece really helps understand the layers that go on top of it. And I think you do a really great job expressing what that is in a really simplistic way that's palatable. So I appreciate you breaking that down. Now, I want to get in a little bit into the type of training that you've went through and maybe talk about what is Delta programming, how were you selected, maybe how are children selected for these programs, and a little bit about just the very beginning of a child's life going into this assassin program.
The formative years of assassination training involves mentorship. This is a critical component, is understanding who the instructors are of the United States best hunters and killers, and that's civilians generally. You're not going to find these people on the list of special forces operators. They're the guys who train them. And the reason they do that is because you need a plausible deniability on what these people do for a living, because the hallmark characteristic of an assassin is that they're undetectable, is that they don't look like the big, scary, buff special forces operator guy. You don't want that guy unless you absolutely have to have that guy, but that's somebody that's used for something that would be a much more like an open and overt, like somebody who's obviously a big, scary, tough guy. Those kinds of people are generally not the kinds of people that we're talking about here. Delta operators are on one side of it, if you look up the public side of what Delta is, Delta Force is a branch within the United States Army of their elite special operations teams. They are people who operate out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and they are they are very, very committed individuals to operate in that form of autonomy so that they don't necessarily require a team. Whereas Green Berets, who are the United States Army Special Forces, who are trained a lot of times in Fort Benning, Georgia, and where the United States Army's infantry units are trained, The Green Berets are a more team-based structured system. They still can have autonomy. They can still operate that way, but they are brought into a major form of a team, whereas Delta operators are being able to be dropped in single team units, meaning one guy and no support team in any capacity, apart from maybe in dire straits and resources. They have different ways of communicating with each other that don't involve normal radio comms and communication. And that goes back to the Jason projects and their forms of communication technologies that they were trying to do with what's called extremely low frequency communications. The United States Navy and came to them and said, we have a problem and we need you to help us communicate through the earth. We want to be able to talk to stuff that's way, 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 way down in the earth and stuff that's way, way, way down in the oceans. And so they decided the best way to do that was to build an antenna array that was the size of Wisconsin, Minnesota, and the lower portions of Canada. So they wanted a 8,000-mile long wire running underneath the ground so that they could pass a pulse signal in a very, very low frequency that could produce something like 6 words a minute, 6 to maybe 10 words a minute, depending on the size of the cable. And so this was a way that they could communicate, they said, for submarines, right? Those guys with those nuclear missiles in the event of this thermonuclear war. The real tenets of that is they needed ways to be able to communicate between the bases of deep underground military bases and down into these other entities that live and occupy other spaces inside the earth. They wanted to be able to communicate with operators that were at any place on the earth or under the earth. And this is where the Jasons got intimately connected with Deltas and with a lot of these operatives that were intimately connected with these need to hunt and kill agents with autonomy around the world. So Delta trainers, people that train the Delta forces, people that train the Green Berets, are brought in with children who are going through this programming and made to be what would be called a handler today. Somebody that's going to be basically a friend, a mentor, or a family member. Like Richard Allen in my family was my uncle, even though he was not my blood relative by any means or standards. He was my dad's best friend. You know, he was the guy who came into my family and would just come and go and be able to impart a lot of this information. Delta trainers and programmers are like that. And so they're the ones who came in and taught me a form of combative martial arts that was basically based on Filipino martial arts and things like Salat. You need a form of physical martial arts that involves small people. And so that's why they use Filipino. And that's why they also were using people that were harem bodyguards. Our culture doesn't have a dynastic rulers in the same way, and so we don't understand this whole idea of like the empires and true like the true rulers, like in the families over in China and in the Middle East, where you have dynasties, and part of those dynasties are their harems. That's their ladies of the night, their concubines. And so the bodyguards for the concubines are generally women and children, because they don't want people who are pubescent. They don't want guys who can have sex with women and sire off bastard children and have these princes rolling around. And so they either will make men eunuchs, like I went through being crushed and my testicles being crushed on a constant basis to make me incapable of being able to copulate. And so I was made to be able to do that so I could be able to be a bodyguard to the kings and their daughters. And they are the major people who train assassins specifically so that you can learn to kill anybody, kill them under 2 seconds, which is different than stopping somebody. Like a lot of the combative systems that are trained today are ways of defending yourself. This is not what we're talking about at all. We're finding ways to turn the off switch in a human being as fast as humanly possible. And that's generally through the destruction of the central nervous system. This is like why tools like you're using super tiny tools, super tiny sharp tools like scalpels, which are disposable. You can get a scalpel, you can replace the blade, you can ditch the blade. You're using tiny pointing things. Like these are other tools. Like I used to, you take screwdrivers, like what are called weapons of opportunity. Major foundational tenets of this training is that you can use anything to dispatch a human being in the room, because you're likely to get searched, you're likely to be potentially caught. And so you want to just use a weapon of opportunity. So you're trained how to kill somebody with anything. And like a screwdriver being one of the main tenets of that. But you can take a screwdriver and with a basic grinding, you can turn it into an ice pick. And an ice pick is incredibly critical if you want to turn off their central nervous system. You want to attack the brainstem so that you can stop their body from moving instantly, and that you can destroy their ability to fight back, make noise, or shout for help, call for backup, or anything else. Like this is why guards and assassins are predominantly used and trained by people that are called sentries, people that are the sentinels, guardians of estates. And you basically start to war game in these training programs. So like my family has a farm in southern Michigan that trained the like top tier guard dogs on the earth. They trained Belgian Malinois, they trained German Shepherds, they trained all these attack dogs to defend and protect properties. And so what would happen is when I was young, my family would take me on a tour when I was on the summer break to all of these different properties where all these handlers were and trainers are. And I would be training how to infiltrate and not get caught, training how to get past guard dogs, training how to be able to infiltrate without lights going off. Like my family had an estate in Rochester, New York, next door to the Clintons when they were president, when Bill and Hillary were presidents in the 1990s. And so my uncle, who like my actual uncle, Hebert Hamilton, he was a New York City police officer. And so he was somebody who was training me on how to be able to do these infiltrations specifically to get past the Secret Service. And so they had an opportunity for me to be able to go over and test whether or not I could get through their security protocols and be able to do what's called like Black Dragon level assassinations. Dragons are a term that's used in the underworld for ambassadors, foreign dignitaries. And in order to do that, you need to be able to get past what are the best guardians on the earth for more or less. And so those were the people that I started going after. Once I got approved to be able to do that training, I had an injury where my grandmother's dog ripped part of my face off. And then I went into facial reconstructive plastic surgery after I got caught on that CCTV footage. They refitted my entire face so that I looked different and I spoke different. I breathed different. My airways were completely reformatted. I got a different lip put in, the lower portion of my lip when I was young, to try to augment the way that I talked and walked so that I could hide again and camouflage again in these groups. Once that took place, I was brought into those military projects and started getting enrolled into special kill teams, which is a whole other arena that we can go down into. What most people think about as, you know, assassins, they're really called special kill teams in the CIA and those and the agencies.
Thank you so much for that. One of the other questions that somebody had submitted, which I think would be good to cover here, is this related to the Hitler projects? And if so, how is that relationship, and what does that I guess have to do with the programs that you were in?
The Heinrich Himmler and a lot of these individuals like Josef Mengele were some of the architects of the scientific methodology for this, because they were overseeing the human experimentation programs in the concentration camps. They had access to the greatest amount of people, human physical bodies, in order to start testing out what does it require in order to shatter a mind, in order for a human body to dissociate, and how do we then reformat that? They were the architects of a lot of that system. And the super soldier program, which was called the Übermensch, which was a designed to be able to breed back the Aryan race and to be able to raise up these superhumans to defend the millennial reign of the Nazis. People have a lack of basic understanding of the occult roots of the Nazis. There's a book for any of you that want to know. This is the Black Awakening, and there's PDFs available out there of this. If you can't find it physically, I'll just say that. Feel free to reach out to me or others to find out about that. But there is a book in here that he references, which is so worth your time, which is The Nazi and the Occult. Let me see if I can find the author of it here. I can't find it. I can't find it in here right now. I'll post a picture in here when I do the video. If I edit the video later on, I'll put the picture of the book in here. But he's got a great explanation. Oh, here it is. Oh, we'll go into Dark Mission and Covens. Oh, this is so good. You guys, this is the type of information, like in one book, you guys, you can dismantle. The Nazi Doctors was the book, Robert J. Lifton, The Nazi Doctors. In it, he defines the concept of doubling. This is like splitting and programming. The way in which doubling allowed Nazi doctors to avoid guilt was not by the elimination of conscience, but by what can be called transfer of conscience, thereby freeing the original self from responsibility of actions. This is the chapter of basically where Rustizar goes into a lot of how they are made. And these are some of the references in the books. Let's see if I can put it in there. I'll read it out, or you can just screenshot it. But G.H. put out a book that's basically the weaponization of hypnotism and the history of that, going through that. And Resurrection of the Third Night is another book where you guys can find out a lot of the information on that and how this programming had a lot of its origination in the the Nazis. For those of you that don't know, the massive foundation of NASA, the Central Intelligence Agency, the Office of Strategic Services, this is the OSS, the formative founders of that. So many of these agencies that were founded in the military industrial complex that gave birth after the 1940s were built and developed and cultivated as by Nazi scientists. The biggest procurement project that took place after World War II was gathering up the physical evidence and the data, because at the time they didn't necessarily have the computing data to be able to take all of the information that people like Mengele and Himmler were accumulating, and they didn't have a way of extrapolating that information, collating that, and communicating that on a large scale. And so they recruited a lot of these scientists and they gave them pardons in something that was called Operation Paperclip, and that's because they found something that was titled the Ozenberg list. The Ozenberg list was a list of all the chief scientists who had the best information on this. And so the United States and the Soviet Union began to try to procure and Great Britain were all trying to scoop up these scientists and their information and bring them in and give them asylum and give them positions in universities and academia and within the United States government, as well as in the United States military projects and the scientific community. And this is where, like Wernher von Braun, the founder of NASA and the rocket program, this is where they all got their start and their origin stories. Another individual who was a key tenet of a lot of the foundation and formulation of this was a guy named Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard. Those names might ding a bell to you guys. If you have ever heard of JPL Labs, Jet Propulsion Laboratories, he's the founder of that, all the rocket scientists that were doing that. And he was a member of the OTO, which was Aleister Crowley's, a modern version of Aleister Crowley's covens and cults, which were also created and formulated and created by the CIA. A lot of these like dark occult groups that people think of as like Satanists and stuff like this, they were founded by the very same spy agencies that people think of as like junk drawer terms, the Defense Intelligence Agency. They would create a lot of these cults and covens in order to advance these different agendas. Jack Parson and L. Ron Hubbard engaged in 1946 in something that was called the Moonchild Ritual, or the Babylon Working. And this was because they had were followers of Moonchild, which is a book that was written by Aleister Crowley, in which he described a very specific type of ritual in order to bring one of these ancient fallen ones up to the surface and impregnate a woman who could raise up a child that was literally the beast, a child that was Babylon embodied in flesh form. And so L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons engaged in a ritual sex magic in the deserts of California to try to bring forth this child. They said it was not successful. They generally don't say things are successful, y'all, when they are, because otherwise it's not a secret. And what took place in that event was the foundation of L. Ron Hubbard moving into found the Church of Scientology and that cult. And Jack Parsons moved into rocket sciences and developed a lot of what we would think of today as the military defense and weapon systems. This is where a lot of the origins were formulated.
Great answer. Thank you so much for that. I know one of the other things I think people struggle with is there's so many pieces to the puzzle, and then relating it together to create the puzzle versus just the individual pieces that people hear of, Project Paperclip, Hitler projects, realizing it's all really interwoven and connected and just built over time to be, a full picture versus these separate things that we hear of. So it really helps when somebody like you can break down those contexts. I had another really great question about the superhuman capabilities that you hear of, that these super soldiers, these skilled assassins are able to cultivate through these programs. And they had asked if that is from a demonic entity attaching to the person, or what causes these superhuman capabilities that are developed in these programs.
So there's two major components of it. There is a physical side of it where technology is being implemented and utilized in order to enhance this, so that you're going to have to go down into the augmentation programs, which is what a lot of the Nazi protocols were trying to do, was physically find a way that we could enhance their soldiers. The main method that they were doing that on the physical side of it was through backbreeding programs. They were trying to breed out what they believed as impure blood. They believed they were the descendants of the Nephilim, that they were the descendants of the gods that were among men. And so they instituted a breeding program back there that bred hundreds of thousands of people in order with only the purest of Aryans, in order to try to establish a genetic line that could raise up and have superpowers. And the way that they kept their blood pure was through charging themselves up with spirits. And it's an intimately connected component of this, you guys, that is so regularly avoided because it's outside of most people's scientific religion that they've been indoctrinated with, that there is only a physical world. And if I can't see it, touch it, taste it, and smell it, and observe it and replicate it, it doesn't exist. And that is built on a false foundation, you guys. There is a very real physical and spiritual realm. And what happens when somebody is being abused, when someone is being traumatized and tortured, there is a spiritual side of evil, a presence that can be felt, that comes in and is brought in, that possesses and rules and dominates somebody to such an extent that they are physically capable of doing an act of abusing, of exploiting a child's innocence in order to advance an agenda that is contrary to all of what humanity has at a baseline, that we should protect children, that we should protect infants and babies in the womb. All of those factors of preservation of life have to get seared off. And in order to do that, there is a spirit that must rule over that person in order to empower them to do that stuff. And now those spirits are consumed with the lust of dark emotion, of dark energy. That is their bread and their butter. They must have that in order to feed and to cultivate and to grow. And so this becomes this insatiable need to cut, to kill, to torture, to strangle, to shatter. And this is why they call these people brutes in the industry. These are guys and women who are fully given over to that. And what happens is when a brute, is doing that act to a child and physically splitting their body apart, splitting their mind apart, those spirits do get transferred into them. And it's a component that is so intimately linked. You cannot break out of it if you refuse to acknowledge or look at this component of it, because when you do try to break free, those spirits still try to come back and control and hide and conceal, and they rule through shame, fear, and guilt. That is like the currency of the kingdom of darkness. That is the power bank of this entire system. And so you cannot separate the kingdom of darkness from the kingdom of light without physically understanding this is a war between immortals. This is a war for the souls of men. Like, they are trafficking in the souls of men. This is the currency of our kingdom. This is the currency of our country. This is what the corporations literally are trafficking, the buying and trading and selling. This is why when people go down and donate blood to the Red Cross, 80% of it gets turned into drugs through the pharmaceutical industry, and people eat that. They're eating each other's life. They're eating each other's souls. People are continually being caught up in this stuff because there are outside agents who are advancing an agenda, an ancient evil, an ancient hate that is only evil continually, has no predilection for love and compassion and tenderness, that has no desire to ever facilitate freedom for anyone ever, because the curse that was placed upon these watchers, upon Azazel and Gadriel and Semyaza, the curse that was placed upon them was they could never repent, and they were cursed to watch their children, their sons and daughters. They were cursed to watch them kill each other before they were bound in prison for 70 generations. Those same watchers were released in the 19th century to advance and to bring about their great revenge protocols. And this is what gave rise to the Spiritism movement. This is what gave rise to the shattering of the family, the destruction of marriage, the destruction of identity, the absolute bringing forth of these ancient religions, the resurrection of the old gods. This is a book. I can't oh no, hold on. Invisible Rainbow. We'll get there. This is a book called The Game of Gods, written by Karl Tykareb. And oh man, y'all, read a book. Gosh dang it. Read a book. Stop watching YouTube all the time. You can't always find information because sometimes authors are really diligent to sit down and formulate what would take them years to communicate to you. Like, people have lived a lot of lives. This guy, I met him at a conference in Canada. Incredible, ferocious Canadians, y'all. They're very genteel and loving. I love Canadians darn near more than any other human group I've ever met on the earth. They are tremendous lovers of people. I love them dearly. And I met Karl Tykareb at a conference also in, oh man, I met him a few times. Anyways, irrelevant, down in Dallas as well. But Karl Tykereb was a guy who was behind the scenes at what people would call like the United Nations and the New World Order. And he started going into their meetings. He's like, why don't I just go and join these groups and find out what they have to say for themselves? And so he was basically a guy who was a double agent inside a lot of these organizations and just got the information from firsthand accounting instead of being like, well, does the Rockefeller Foundation really have a different agenda? Like, does the Carnegie Foundation have a different agenda? And like his book, the subtitle of it, sorry, I didn't even read it, The Temple of Man in the Age of Re-enchantment. And that's what we're living in. We're living in the time where people are being re-enchanted with the old gods, where the old religions are having their rebirth. And because of that, these deities that people are talking about, Zeus and Pleiades, these astro gods and all of these like these characters that have been in antiquity through Greek and Roman architected like mythologies and everywhere else. People are literally resurrecting that. Disney programming and all these other agencies, the prophets of Baal, they're trying to bring about this systemic re-engineering of a society that does believe in the gods again, that does believe in a plurality of universes, that believes in spirits, that believes in these other realms and these other dynastic figures that are operating outside of it. They're re-engineering our society in that because the scientific religion, the gods of science and religion are dying. That old religion from the 1800s into the 20th century is dying off because there's so much observable evidence of spiritual encounters and spiritual experiences that can be readily made available to people that do seek it out diligently. The Father, I believe there is one absolute authority over all of them, Yahweh Elohim Sevaoth. I grew up reading the scriptures as God and Lord and Jesus and these characters that I would read about in the Bible. And then I was like, you know what? There is either an absolute authority over all of this, a true archon, that a true principality that governs all of society, all of creation, that has the right to stop this, the right to say no, the right to judge it, the right to destroy it, the right to blot it out, the right to raise people from the dead. Like there has to be an overseer of all of this, a judge of all the earth. And I found him in the scriptures because I tested the scriptures from the earliest years of my life. I began to read them and study them because I believed that if this was true, then how to defeat the dragon, the absolute incarnate body of evil that was operating continually, seeking to steal, kill, and destroy, this serpent of old, that ancient hate had a vulnerability, had a weakness. And if I was trained my whole life on how to infiltrate and destroy my targets, I knew that ultimately there was going to be one target above all targets for me to go after the rest of my life. And that was the great red dragon. That is who I have gone and committed myself to make my war again. I stopped fighting the people, the human agents on this, because I realized that if I was always possessed with that ancient hate in order to fuel myself, to walk silently, to strangle people I love to death so that I could have the power of shamanism and shape-shifting and skinwalking so that I could be a transformer like them. I went into those circles on the Apache reservation outside of Pine Top, Cholo Lakeside. I gave myself completely over to that ancient hate because I saw that was the power source in order to enact my revenge on the pedophiles, to enact my revenge on these occult groups. I wanted power in order to contend against them. I wanted vengeance desperately for the victims of this because I have seen and witnessed constant, perpetual, systemic abuse of the most precious resources on this earth, which are children. They are called the segulah in Hebrew. That's like the most precious treasure. Like I've got these little topaz gemstones that I just finished tumbling. And like, these are super precious stones. Topaz is rarer than diamonds. Like these stones are worth more to me than diamonds. Diamonds are an illusion, a scarcity of wealth, a scarcity. Oh, just go into the dynasties of that. These formulas, y'all, that have been utilized, the conspiracy of silence that you brought forth, the Rhodes Society and the Rhodes Foundation. This is because people have been lying and systemically covering up pertinent pieces of information so that the regular group of the masses of people don't know how to give informed consent. They don't know how to act wisely. They don't know how to act in their better self-interest because they're being engineered to go along with the agenda of the rulers, to go along with the agenda of the intelligentsia, the kings and the priests, so that they don't scatter the herd. Because you guys, we are so much more powerful than all of these systems of control they have ever put into place. You have no idea the power of truth when you're contending against a kingdom of deceit. Like if I turn off all these lights, guys, this is like, it's critically important that you understand this because I spent a lot of time in caves and in underground bases where you could turn off all the lights and understand that a darkness can be felt. Like there is a darkness that can be felt, but that darkness is utterly destroyed and extinguished with a single little tiny bit of light. Let me just show you this because this is important. When we sit in total darkness, y'all, we sit in total darkness. One person who stands up and fights back against this can light a signal torch, can actually light up a signal to everyone else in the entire created room that there's somebody else out there burning brightly, that somebody else out there is fighting for them, that even this tiny little, this is 1 candle watt, right? This is like 1 candle. It's an oil burning lamp. This is what people have been using for thousands of years in order to see, in order to move around. You can't see far, but you can see a little bit, just far enough to get to the next step. This is how the light conquers the darkness. It says the darkness, light has pierced the darkness, and the darkness does not understand it. Darkness can never comprehend and understand light because it's the absolute antithesis of what it is. This is the weapon of warriors, is truly fighting back and lighting up the signal fires and saying, you're not alone. You can fight and you can win and you can overcome. No matter what they told you, you can be the victor. You can be the conqueror of darkness. You can be the conqueror of cowardice. You don't have to give in, even though you were the person who did that evil. Like, that's why I wrote the book, you guys, because I knew at the end of the day, people are going to wake up in this madness. There is going to come a great black awakening where so many people are going to go out and slaughter and kill and rip the throats out of people. They're going to eat people. They're going to consume them. They're going to drink blood and eat human organs. And they're going to wake up the next morning and have no idea what happened. They're going to have no idea why everybody on this list that they never knew about is suddenly dead, or they themselves are dead and all of their children are dead and they don't know what's going on. Russ Dizdar calls it the Black Awakening. They used to call this the ancient hate rising up. This is what the SS and Heinrich Himmler was trying to architect through this great impartation of the spirit of the black sun, the spirit of the black hand. They were trying to raise up the beast's army that's going to ultimately be a group of people who will ally themselves to fight back against everybody who has any values and morality and any convictions of truth and righteousness. And they're going to make war with those who guard the commands of loving your neighbors and loving Yahuwah with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. They go out to make war with the people that believe righteousness is better than wickedness, that truth is better than deceit. They are wholly committed and giving themselves over to a darkening of their minds so that they will never tolerate righteousness. They won't tolerate truth and morality, the things that make us people. That kingdom is the ones that we wage this war with. And I wrote this book because I know there's people who woke up this morning, who puked blood into a toilet, who have no idea why all these weapons are in their trunks, who don't know where these fingers and these rings and these earlobes came from, that are sitting in their basement, and they have no idea what's going on. And they're living with dread and terror and despair day and night, and they have no idea how to get out. They don't know how to get out. I was trapped for so long. I was trapped. And I did not know how to get out. I needed someone to show me the way, just to show me that you can stop and be free. I didn't see it. I never saw them get out. Like, I was so compartmentalized and moved around all the time. My friends were controlled. My family members were controlled. I didn't know who was authentic. And it took me so long to find people that were actually fighting against this darkness, fighting against this evil. I waited for so long to see somebody exposing it, somebody tearing it apart and tearing into it and dismantling it and waging a war against it. It really wasn't until I saw Russ Dizdar doing that and another guy named Steve Quayle and Dr. Michael Lake and Mary Lou. They wrote these 2 books, which are stinking worth your time, y'all. I can't recommend this one enough. It's called What Witches Don't Want Christians to Know. That's written by Mary Lou Lake, who's a survivor of this mind control. This is her husband, Dr. Michael Lake, wrote this book called The Shinar Directive. These people, seeing them being ferocious and dismantling this and fighting, like, I fought so many times. Like, I have seen people at their most exposed. Like, when you go in and you kill somebody, like, I didn't like using guns. I didn't like using bombs. I didn't like using poisons. Like, I wanted to be intimately connected to the person as they died, because I had such a pile of filth that was sitting on my shoulders. I had so many children's names carved into my mind, so many of their faces. Like, I witnessed so much death. I wanted them to feel it. I wanted them to know it. I wanted them to feel the dread that I lived with day and night because my dad sold my body to my great-grandfather so he could have the trust fund. I wanted them to know what it felt like to have a predator come and stalk them in the darkness and silence their screams. I wanted them to know what that was like, even if it was just for a moment. They needed to know what others had worn on their flesh and worn on their mind and carried in their souls, the scars that no amount of scrubbing can get off. Like there's no amount of washing of the eyes to get out of there the irrevocable damage that happens when you see children being fed to their mothers, seeing men splitting babies in half. Like you cannot comprehend the level of evil until you're in it. And then once you're in it, there's no category that fits your daily waking life. And so you just shatter apart because you're not made to witness this stuff, but some of us literally were. And so we're carriers of this rage, of this. And when we go out into the normal world, when we go and look for vengeance and justice from the justice system in our society, we find people that swear the same oaths, people that are swearing the very same oaths of silence and of cover up and of willingness to cover up the crimes of other brothers so that they can go ahead and continue on in whatever they were doing. Like when you realize the very people that you're supposed to be their mandatory reporters, and you go to them and you be like, hey, this man sodomizes me, he rapes me, and they turn around and tell your parents and they tell your abusers, and you get tortured and shattered and shipped away, you realize you're like, well, why do I bother? It enforces the learned helplessness. This is the compartmentalization that you realize when you go out and you try to tell people about this and they make you look crazy and the character assassinate you and they make you just go away. They just try to dissuade everyone from listening to your testimony because they're like, listen, this guy's just nuts. Okay, he's crazy. You're dang right I'm crazy. Crazy as a stinking day is long, you guys. What the heck do you think people have lived through out there? The reality of what crazy is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. This is the people plugging into the Monday and Friday lifestyle and plugging into the politicking solution, looking for a political messiah that's never going to come, you guys. You're looking for the answers in all the wrong places, the places where corporate engineers have told you that's where the solutions are found. The solutions are found when men are men. Men stop this when they become shepherds again. Like if you have no idea what to do about this matter, absolutely have zero tolerance of evil. It's really simple. Somebody screwed around with your mind to make you passive and sissified so that you would let this stuff happen to your family, to your children, to your friends, to your neighbors, and you would just turn a blind eye and say, if I don't see it, it's not happening to me, until it comes kicking down your door. And you know what? More often than not, once it finally does and their children get abused, they go along with the conspiracy of silence because they try to get justice from these. Oh, I'll just go to my priest and tell him what happened. I'll just go to my pastor and tell him what happened. I'll just go to my police officer or the FBI and tell him what happened. And then they're caught up in the same swirling nightmare and seeing the perpetrators getting set free and seeing the victims being incriminated. They're like, oh, we see you brought forward your child pornography, like all the child porn that people filmed of people raping me and sodomizing me. If I brought that forward as evidence to try to validate my testimony, they would throw me in prison because I was the one holding child pornography, even though it's me in the videos. Do you see how sick and twisted and corrupted the system is? So then you ask people, well, how do you stop it? You cut the head off of the dragon and the body follows. It's very simple. You have to go for the head of this entire system. And that really is these spiritual entities that are physical, real creatures that exist on the earth. You have to cut off their power source. And that means you no longer give them your life. You cut away the systems of control that have been using you to feed the beast. You can literally stop giving them your time, your energy, your resources, your emotions, your worship. When you turn off their television, their programming devices, when you stop eating the way they're telling you, when you stop drinking what they're telling you, you stop wearing what they're telling you to, you stop acting the way they're telling you to, and you become autonomous. When you become somebody who sets up themselves as not like the others, as somebody who is what used to be called holy, that just means set apart. You're not like the rest of them. You're not willing to go along so quietly into the night with the adversaries of love. You're willing to instead stand and embrace and defend each other and go to war for each other and lay down your life for each other, because that's what true love is. And that's who the real creator, the judge of all the earth, his foundations of his throne are justice and mercy, mishpat and zadikah. That's the currency of his kingdom. And when you walk in true justice and true mercy, it empowers you to overcome this darkness. The reason I'm alive today, the reason people aren't using this kind of stuff on me all the time to kill me, that they can't walk around and kill me with one of these little tools to drive a nail through my body and dismember me and dispatch me, is because there really is someone who is sovereign over all of the system, who can heal you, who can deliver you and restore your mind and grant you peace that surpasses understanding, so that you're not plagued with the nightmares. You're not plagued with the ruinous heap of violence that's going on. You had a question in there, Emma, that I wanted to answer that was about, what did you feel when you remembered these things? There was a question that was off that line, and I wanted to read a section in my book, so that people could understand what it's like to have to sit next to like somebody else, a normie, right? My wife is not, she didn't grow up in any of this stuff, you guys. Like, my wife is like, oh, she was blessed with like a normal life. My gosh, because if not, it would have been too much crazy all over the place all the time in here. And I had to tell this woman all this level of darkness that was there. Do you have that question, Emma?
Yes, let me grab that real quick. I was just looking at that one too. What did you feel emotionally when you realized you were used as a hitman?
So this is, y'all, I got my whole book as an audiobook, an ebook. You can buy it on Amazon if you want, but I also give it away on like the descriptions of all my YouTube channels or on my website. You go to my website, like it's there for free to download. Like, I don't want anybody to not have access to information, period. Not for money, not for anything else. Like, just go there and get it. If you want to pay for it, great. If not, you can go to my website and you can buy it for 000. Like, I don't need money. I just want you guys to have the information. This is chapter 12. And this is literally in the moment of wrestling with how to tell my wife the level of who I really was. How do I bring forth this whole identity as a killer to her? Because she did not know me as that. She knew me as like a Christian guy who worked in psychology and just liked helping people, who was happy, who was outgoing, who was very extroverted. And then this other guy showed up halfway into our marriage at the time, who was completely other than that. I was strapping knives to my body all the time, wearing guns, like burying things out in the woods, going and stalking pedophiles and writing out dossiers and intelligence reports in Boulder community. Like, I became a totally different person, and she had no category for this. But this is chapter 12, which you can read online. It's called The Savior in Our Midst. I knew there was no way I could keep it a secret, not anymore. The memories were there all the time. I could not escape the shadowed sight of souls passing away, the spark of life leaving their eyes, the moment of death, the moment of madness and misery. Even as I tried to focus on telling her about these things, the memories flooded through my mind, desperate to keep me buried in fear. My wife was cuddling up next to me, and our daughter was sleeping soundly just a few feet away. She talked about things I can't remember, something about going for a walk the next day. I thought I should be listening, but I couldn't. There's no one to listen when our blood boils and the faces return. All I could see were the plots, the plans, the schemes, the ways of the garrote, the wire that strangled a man in the front seat after my blade dealt with his partner in the back. I could not see anything but those eyes and felt the sorrow for something I did not understand. Another pebble on this path of remembering. Why did they have to watch me? Who sent them? Was it the order or another brother sworn to protect a knight? What was the purpose of this problem that was pestering my past? I asked the Father for forgiveness again, but these strangers who spent their final moments looking at a monster in the mirror, would they ever look away and see something else? Would they ever see the wife whose fingers placed the gold band on his left hand? I wanted to let her crush my skull the way I crushed her husband's throat. I wish she would pummel me with her fists and spit on my body. Would she weep bitterly for the man whose limp form sagged inches from my face? Did she beg God to know why? Did she have to identify his body on a cold steel table? Was she alone when she said, "That's him"? Did he have children who went to sleep with a father but awoke to misery? My God, these questions crushed my soul. I couldn't hear what my wife was saying. I was trying so hard to remember that I was no longer wrestling with death in the heat of that swampy district. I was desperately trying not to count the seconds it took for him to stop fighting. My God, did you hear the sounds of strangulation? Why didn't you stop me? My God, where are you? Where is your hope? How I wished I could tell her I didn't know what I was doing, that I was just another man's killing machine, a soldier who followed orders and accomplished the sanctioned mission, the company's craft at its finest. It's all I ever knew. No one ever told me how to say no. What do you tell your wife when she looks over at you and asks you, honey, are you okay? Do you tell her that you were still staring at a man's eyes when he is bursting from the pressure of the cord you buried in his neck? Do you tell her that you couldn't breathe when you saw the rearview mirror this morning when you loaded your daughter into her car seat last week? Or do you stuff it all back into the boxes it was kept in? No one gave me this information. It was not mission critical. But learning how many seconds it takes a femoral artery to bleed a body out when someone is fighting for their life was. Our instructors had us watch dozens of videos of it over and over again. Different sized people, men, women, children, different levels of fear and terror and frenzy. We watched them all. We were trained how to keep quiet even as they begged and screamed. They taught us how to turn off our hearing. The last vestiges of our conscience were seared by the irons of madness. No matter how many times we trained not to hear them, their voices would come crawling back in the dark. In the stillness, they were there. We had to keep them quiet for so long, but the fathers told us that we don't have to anymore. We no longer have to keep the secrets of murder, misery, and madness. That week in September, we finally broke down and screamed in our car. We had written about 7 more bodies that fell by our company-controlled hands. We drove away from that little cafe we'd been riding in and screamed until our throat grew hoarse. Our words were an incense of agony ripe with the brutal honesty I stopped hiding from my healer. My God, do you hear us screaming? Did you hear the sound of that girl whose severed hands are on the floor next to the brute's feet? My God, what happened to the other boy, the one who was once right by our side? That chosen one they're turning into another chameleon of death. Please set him free from the tortured tunnels of turmoil that he's locked in. Save him, Messiah, I beg you. There's so many of us out there, and who will tell us we are forgiven? Who forgives children whose manipulated hands are stained with blood? Who will tell us no one has forgotten those screams, those pleas in the plots of land they were buried and burned to bodies? My Father, I beg you, don't let it be wasted. Not a single utterance of agony that flowed from the bleeding lips of the many children, teens, and adults. I can't unsee the eyes of this man. Father, did you see them? Why did I have to get out of the car and not them? Will you forgive me? Please, I didn't know what I was doing. I still don't. No one gave me answers, not my commanders nor their superiors. No one told me why. Why them? Why this person and not that? Why did they need 3 vials of blood from this man's neck? Why did we have to shove the engraved copper ring on the fingers of the quiet man's bodies? Wet workers don't get answers, just diamond-dusted wires, blades, bullets, or syringes of potassium and craftily engineered biological agents. Why can't I say I'm sorry to his widow? Will they kill me for what I've done? Out of the bellows of our broken heart came forth a cry of such raw intensity that it scattered the wounds. The wind and the waves are all I can see. Abba, my Father, please save me. This is what it's like trying to deal with this stuff when you're trying to unravel what happened to you, because I was not willing for my daughter who is sitting there in that bed to go through this. Like, she is my why. I wrote a chapter in here called A Letter from My Daughter because I thought I was going to die, you guys. I thought I would be killed every time I'd sit down and write this stuff. I was convinced, so convinced that I would be murdered for talking about this, that I would watch my wife be tortured, that I'd watch my children be torn apart. I was so convinced that they would destroy me for this. But you know what? Here I am, you guys, as a living stone of testimony. 7 years later, I'm still here, and I'm still lighting up those signal fires and telling you guys, you can come out of this. You can come out of this. And you know why I'm not dead? Because there is a judge of all the earth, and he is the one who says yes or no at the end of the day. And you know what? For now, he says live. And so because of that, I must live, and I must tell the truth no matter the cost. And I tell this truth because I love you all who are watching this, who will ever come across this information. You can come out of this no matter what you've done or what's been done to you. You can be set free. And I say that because I know so many of you are truly cowards, and you're covering this up because you think you can't get out, but you can. And the only way out is through radical exposure of who you are, the truth. You must confess what you've done, no matter how depraved, how dark, how demonic. You have to tell it all. If you don't tell it all, you're going to be found wanting in the day of your judgment, because it's an inevitability for every one of us. We will all stand and give an account for what we did with this life that we were entrusted with. Our lives are a vapor, and it's passing away. And some of you, today is that day, is your last day. You woke up today not knowing it was the day that you were going to die. But you know what? I woke up many days knowing this person was going to have the last day they ever lived. I woke up knowing the moment of their death was imminent. Your deaths are imminent. So live ferociously, courageously. Live a life that's worth remembering, not a life that's worth being ashamed of.
Thank you so much. You have such eloquent ways of giving hope in really, really hard situations. And I just want to say I'm so sorry for what you went through. And I mean, it's just horrific to even try to comprehend it, and then thinking about how that must have been for you having children when you're coming to these realizations and seeing the innocence in them and trying to comprehend it yourself, how somebody could have failed you so bad, and it's such a true testament to just the power of survivors and the lessons that they've learned that so many of us don't. There's so many parents that don't have these values, and it's so sad that you had to go through what you did to learn a lot of what you did. But at the same time, these lessons are so crucial for society to learn and for parents to learn and to be humbled by and to take into consideration when they're looking at their kids, that level of depravity that that they don't. So I thank you for sharing that, because I can't even imagine how painful it is just to even think about that, much less talk about it. And it's so beautiful, the relationship that you and Chelsea have, and that you guys were able to overcome all of this together, and that you're able to give your children the lives that you didn't have, Nathan, that you're able to break that cycle that went on for so long in your family. That alone is such a miracle. It's there's nothing more powerful than breaking generational trauma. And to think about all the different things that you were offered if you would have stayed in the system, all the wealth, the power, and that you were just willing to walk away from it when nobody for generations was, and they still aren't. You're a freaking warrior, Nathan. You are such a warrior. And I'm so happy that men and women and children get to hear your testimony and learn these important lessons from you. And I'm so grateful that you're here to share this with us, because this is really how we elevate society, is by taking all of this in and learning from it. Going off of that, I want to talk to you about, or rather, I'd love to hear you talk about the periodization. Somebody had asked about the periodization of this training and childhood, and when it starts and how that sort of looks as a child develops. And obviously you were put into the military way earlier than anybody else in society would be. So just sort of maybe going into that aspect of it, now that we understand what the delta programming is, how they can fracture the mind, what does that structure look like for a child?
It's the prerequisite is that they have to have a big enough why. If they aren't motivated enough, they are not capable of being successful. The whole foundation of it is they must be willing and capable of operating as a lone individual, as somebody who will only know loneliness the rest of their life. Like it's a compartmentalization of an attribute of man that is not good. Like we were not made to be alone. And so the shattering produces these separate compartments within the mind, within the psyche, within the soul. It also creates a physiological compartmentalization of areas in the brain. They call them neural trauma pockets. It's a physical set of neural portions of the brain that are holding on all of these experiences, these traumas, and these personalities. And they literally become like inner rooms in the mind, in a representation of a system that is built in. A system can be laid out by a programmer. A programmer is somebody that just enacts their intentions and their will on somebody else. It's not some kind of like, I think people hear programmer and they think there's guys sitting there with computers and electrodes jacking into people's brains and typing in all this code and all that. They think of a computer programmer, but a computer programmer is not the idea that needs to come to your mind. It's somebody who knows how to communicate a pattern inside of another individual that has structure. It's like you're creating an inner world, okay? Like a city, a town, an arena, a building. And inside that space are personalities, components of the person's soul. I call them littles rather than fragments or parts, because they are still collectively me. It's not that they are some other thing. It's not that it's something else. It's who I am. It's just an aspect of myself that does not maybe fit my normal waking understanding of who I am. And so the compartmentalization is used to stage skill sets in different portions of the person's system. So you're going to have components that are trained on weapons. You're going to have personalities that are trained with weapons, trained on use of force. That would be various ways of killing. You're going to have components that are trained on running, evading, using of different kinds of technology, whether that's a vehicle, like a regular motor vehicle, whether that's an aircraft, whether that's a submarine, whether that's underwater operations. They're going to have different types of training encoded in them for surveillance, for escape and evasion, for survival. There's all kinds of patterns and systems that are put into place through various different trainers that's going to come along, or mentors that come along in that child's life, who imbues that into their area. Like my family used to have like photo albums that they would put out and set out, and basically was, as somebody would flip through the pages, they could pick which personality they wanted and order that. Like, this was how they sold me. This is how a child exploitation ring will operate, you guys, is they literally have like a menu that is handed to somebody that's wanting to utilize their child. Okay. And I know this is really hard to get your head around, but people really do profit off their children through the exploitation of them physically, mentally, emotionally, or sexually. And that is their family business. That was the currency that my family found in order to fuel their empire. I'm not from the Reynolds aluminum and tobacco bloodline direct. Our family's from the Reynolds bloodline that built the system, the black gold side of the Reynolds family. We were the ones that cleaned up all the messes in the business and the procurement contracts with the military so that they could operate in this stuff. Because like in the 1960s, the United States military, the Navy, wanted a deep diving submersible. So they went to the Reynolds family to build one out of aluminum. And so they called it a research vessel that could dive down. It's called the Illuminaut. They wanted to be able to go down and collect some secrets that were going on down under the water. They went to the family in order to do that. The Reynolds family that I come from were people that brokered deals. They were contractors between them. They were headhunters. They would connect somebody, a talent scout, for one business company to another. In all kinds of the criminal world, they would recruit from places like Fort Leavenworth, which is where the military soldiers, if you're convicted of crimes, the United States military, or the United States Army, I should say, you're convicted and you're sent to a place called Fort Leavenworth. Fort Leavenworth is a place where a lot of the what's called human terrain experts are recruited out of, and where they're trained and brought out of. These are people that are trained anthropologists who are the ones who go and map out the psychological and human terrain of different areas before the soldiers go over there. And they do that by beta testing things on convicted soldiers. So they're looking for people that already have proclivities towards murder and violence and extreme forms of abuse. They're going to recruit them out of the prison systems. They're going to recruit them out of these occult societies and these Masonic working orders. Those become a lot of times the brutes and the trainers, because they already have that skill set. They already have that training. All that's needed is they will execute that person through lethal injection, but really that person who was killed is not killed. They're then brought in, and now they have a new identity that's brought into them. They become the trainers in these underworlds and start training up assassins in order to become what they were, which is serial killers. The serial killer, the myth of a lone wolf serial killer, is never a reality. If you start to dig into any of the closets of any of these serial killers, you're going to find government agencies, military intelligentsia, and massive cover-ups. One of the best examples of that, there's a guy who was where was it? A lot of these manuals, you guys, have been declassified recently. I was telling Emma, there was just a crazy amount of data dump that was recently done that you can see on a website that's called, let me just go to the main site here for you guys. Whale.to, WHALE.to. I say it now so you guys that are gifted with computers and everything else can go ahead and make up a whole bunch of backups to each of these sites and these links, because this will open up a lot of doors. But basically, this is people who have gone forth to put together a exposition of the mafia state murder system. That's the family. So when you hear the word mafia, you guys, that's the Italian word for family. So when I'm referring to the family, other languages, they would just call it the mafia. But people in our culture would think of stereotypical, like the Sopranos and other brainwashing culture that we've got from it, not understanding what this really is talking about. But on their website there, they have an incredible breakdown of various different methodologies, from CIA assassin training manuals, like the Phoenix program, to the psychological operations in guerrilla warfare, which was released to the Contras in Central America. These were the ways that they were training assassins in different countries and different cultures. A lot of these documents, you guys, have been released and declassified, like the Human Resource Exploitation Training Manual from 1983, which is how they were training torturers, how to do it. The CIA's assassin manuals under Project Kubrick. This is a data dump, you guys, where you could go ahead and get lost in a spider web of information about what's been going on here. But one of the best textbooks of this was a guy. Oh, where is he?
And you can feel free to, if you want to screen share anything.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Let me go ahead and do that. Hold on a second here.
Yeah, or if you want, you could give me the website and I'm happy.
Just go to whale.to.
Okay, tell me how to WHAL.
WHALE.
.TL.
Yeah, TO, like Thomas
TO.
Oppenheimer.
Okay, give me a second for this. Oh wow! Oh my goodness.
There's
a lot of stuff on here.
Oh yeah. Just gonna fire you up.
All right, I'll screen share this and then you can explain it.
Through.
Okay.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Hold on, I'll just try to navigate it from your screen, watching your screen to do that. Hold on. Or can I just drop a link in our chat? I'm going to drop a link in our chat, Emma. I'm going to save the day here.
Oh, perfect. Okay, that'll work. Bring this up. All right, now I got it. Let me screen share this. Oop.
There you go. So this, you can go to, they have a page on here that's called the Phoenix program. And this is one of the subsets on here. This is a guy called Henry Lee Lucas, who was one of the most publicized and notarized serial killers, who is credited with killing 400 to 600 people. Most people don't know about him because he's not a junk drawer name, like, you know, the much more famous ones. But he was pardoned by George Bush in 1998 from an execution that was supposed to take place. This is a guy who was in and out of prison systems, being caught after, like, he was first convicted of murder decades before this of his own mother in a very severe and extreme way. And he was let off 10 years early into his sentence, and went out and telling people, hey, at his sentencing or his parole hearing, he told them, if you let me out of here, I'm going to kill more people. They let him out anyways. And this is because there's always an agency behind these guys. They specifically target and recruit people who already have these proclivities, this desire for vengeance. Then they train them up in these cults, you guys. So what happened is that this Henry Lee Lucas was let back out to go hunt again, and he started killing more and more people. He eventually got caught trying to bring in a 12-year-old girl for child exploitation, right? He got caught, thrown back in prison for a couple of years, got let out again on a short sentence. And between that sentence and the last time he was arrested, he committed hundreds of other killings, and killings of all different kinds. Now, at first, when it was released, they just tried to make him out to be this lone wolf assassin, this lone wolf serial killer who was just all into all kinds of crazy, disgusting things of necrophilia and cannibalism and the worst kinds of evil to men, women, and children, all different ages. What he ended up talking about, that he was part of a cult, which was called the cult of death hands. And for all of these years, he was working and taking assignments for this satanic coven in order to do these operations, and that he was part of a military industrial cult that was operating this way. His is a very good breakdown and study that helps to dismantle what I think most people have been brainwashed to thinking about with serial killers and with the judicial system, and how people are recruited who are already have these proclivities, who are found like in juvenile detention centers. Like, this is where they begin to grab people that maybe weren't raised up in the family or in the network particularly, but these are kind of free agents that pop up on the radar. And this is where they are recruited out of and then brought into these covert operation teams, because they already have those criminalistic tendencies. They already have the willingness to go out and commit heinous crimes. So then they're just trained up on how to do it by following orders. And this is where modern advances in technology have allowed them to do deprogramming and fracturing on individuals as they're later in life. And he is just one of the best cases of it. He worked very close in hand with the Texas Rangers, who were part of this things. And he was explaining and exposing ranches down on the borders of Mexico and Mexico and America, where these occult rituals were being done, where these body farms were, where these training programs were taking place, and the hand of death, and where they were operating. And so, anyways, I just wanted to bring that in. There's this website, you guys. You can spend many, many months of research investigating it. This is one of the best put together little tidbits I have found in a long time. And I was very thankful for this because it helps to bring a clear understanding and identification of how these axis of evil has taken place in there. I'm going to send you another link, Emma, if you could show this one as well. This will be beneficial as well. Hold on a second. This one is the Phoenix program. And there's a guy who did the best interview. If you guys want to find out way more about the Phoenix program, you can go listen to the guy's name who he came out and did a lot of whistleblowing on that. His name was Chip Tatum. And in 2009 or 1999, he did a series of interviews with a guy named Ted Gunderson. And there is that's available on YouTube and on his YouTube channel, Chip Tatum's, and on Ted Gunderson's. There's transcripts on this website. They have a link for the transcript of that entire 12-hour breakdown, but that link is broken and is not working. Anyways, but those are still available on YouTube. I'll send you this link, Emma, so that you can get people to the Phoenix program for those that are wanting to actually just go ahead and corroborate and investigate for themselves how this works. Now, to those of you guys that may have a history of this, and there was a question earlier that Emma had about what are some signs or clues along the way if you may be considering that this may be something that happened to you or you are a part of. What were some of those clues that can help them maybe understand that and identify that? First and foremost, above all of that, for me, that was a major red flag, was the evasiveness in my life and the need to hide all the time, the need to conceal myself from any aspect of the public. This whole thing we're doing right now, talking about people being in public, goes against the every aspect of how I was raised to be. Like, I was trained at a very young age that I could not stand out, that I was never to be noticed, that I was always to be background noise, that I was to live in mediocrity and the middle class kingdom, never deviate from the norm, never stand out, never be brilliant, never be excellent. So even like in my school, in my training, like anytime I excelled at all, I had to take tests intentionally and miss major components of it. I was never allowed to score into the high 90th percentiles, because this is what flags a lot of these secret and find programs that are built into to identify these kinds of players. And my family did not want me being utilized by anybody else in these agencies. They wanted to have solo control of me. They didn't want anybody else having access to me, because for them was their money-making machine. And they didn't want that to come out. And so a lot of those hallmark indicators are extreme brilliance, extreme, like if you shatter somebody's mind who say has an IQ of 100, okay, and you end up with somebody that is not necessarily 50-50, but kind of is, that a major component of their core personality is no longer present and capable of helping them to function and go about their daily life. And so the major focus through these inbreeding programs, through multi-generational families, is to bring back a purity of genetics so that they can bring back high intelligence, so that when they do shatter and split the mind, that individual personalities and components could still be very high functioning and have still a very high IQ, so they could be capable of processing information and accomplishing these tasks. The biggest thing and giant warning flag for everyone that's ever wondering about this is missing time. Missing time is the hallmark characteristic of mind control that people need to be on the lookout for. If you or your family members or people that are around you have major components of their life, especially their childhood, that are missing, that there's just nothing there, where there's segments of maybe time when they were going to school and they got into specialized classes, gifted and talented programs, and they had got taken on field trips, and there's just these missing windows of time. These are all big red flags. You got to at least start checking into some of these areas. But specifically with the assassin training was the predilection towards a lot of weaponry, of an aptitudes. Like, I could pick up somebody's firearm that a firearm model that I'd never touched, and I could operate it immediately. And like, there was little clues along the way that there was another skill set that I had, like other languages. Like, on my normal waking life, I couldn't speak other languages well. But as soon as I was in an immersive environment, like my wife and I went on our honeymoon down in Mexico, and I was conversational with people in Spanish, and it freaked her out. It freaked her out because I had access to a way of communicating with people in other languages that all the rest of my life didn't exist. All the rest of my life didn't happen. Like, I could speak French in a way that I could get around and at least comprehend what people were saying. My family brought over as one of these little like girls, pleasure girls, a foreign exchange student when I was in 6th grade. And she was literally would sit with me in the basement and train me on French so that I could speak and be able to interact with a French intelligence agency that was trying to procure some of my services for some of the work I was doing. And this was just like a season of my life, a brief window of my life. But people that have this high intelligence, they have an aptitude towards learning. And if they're very focused, they can learn and absorb this information and then implement it. And so some of the big clues and hallmark indicators are also other languages that maybe you don't say when you're coming out of anesthesia. This is one of those hallmark moments where sometimes this information will slip out. Like I came out of anesthesia when I had a surgery to try to correct some of the testicular issues that I had from all the abuse that I suffered. And when I came out of that, I was roaring and screaming about killing and about murder, about all these other things that were going on. When in my normal waking life, this was stuff I never talked about. These are things that were big clues for me. Reading and hearing Russ Dizdar talk about what chosen ones are, where they have these runners profiles where they were strapping blades to their chest all the time. Like I used to always have to have a knife on me at all times. I used to put razor blades inside the soles of my shoes. Like I used to carry around purple monk's hood, which was a poison that was used in order to do assassinations. Like I didn't know why I had this predilection for selecting certain plants and making tinctures and reducing those down. Like tobacco, I would buy cans of chewed tobacco and boil them down on the kitchen stove and get this tonic, this black tar, and I would keep that in pills so that I didn't even know why a lot of this stuff was happening, but I would have these things on me and around me and just tucked away all the time. Like I used to be obsessed with small caliber pistols, very, very small caliber pistols, and carrying those around with me and carrying rifles that were sawn down. Like I didn't know where the origins of a lot of these like drives, where a lot of these motivating factors were, why I was carrying around duffel bags and heavy construction trash bags and carrying around different sets of clothing in my car, waking up with somebody else's stuff in my car. Like I didn't know where a lot of this stuff came from and I didn't have answers to it. And so instead you just put it into that category of, I don't know, it's just some kind of weird thing that happened one time. There's a lot of disjointed memories that people have that they generally just are not in a place where their life, where they have three main components, where they're not in that fight or flight or freeze mode all the time. And they're able to deal with it. Like I couldn't deal with this stuff when I was 19 years old, 18 years old and coming out of the military and trying to go to college and trying to get back some level of normalcy. And I had so much trauma, physical brain damage, so much abuse, so many drugs and pharmaceuticals that I was on that I was not even in a state where I could comprehend and process all of what had happened to me. I wasn't in that state when I first married Chelsea because I wanted to just have a relationship with somebody. Like I just wanted to know love, like love that wasn't adulterated with somebody else's secret intentions. I just wanted to know that and experience that long enough that I knew it was real and that she was real before I opened up and dealt with it. But my wife provided a safe harbor for me. She provided an environment of peace, like shalom, so that my life wasn't so chaotic and going in 5,000 directions all the time. She provided for me stability. Like I didn't move. I used to move all the time. And just the act of moving all the time is very destabilizing. But if you're finally in an environment where you feel safe, where you have your basic needs met, it opens up your mind to be able to access these other areas. Your body goes, hey, it's okay. We can deal with some stuff now. You know what I mean? If you have the support system around you to where also you're not going to have to work anymore. Like I don't advise survivors necessarily to dig into all of this. I don't recommend my book for everybody. I don't recommend that people even open that door unless they're in a situation in their life where they can really deal with completely coming undone, because that's generally what's going to happen, you guys. You're going to open that door up and you're going to have to look into those closets of unutterable agony, in horrible, horrible things that have happened to you that took place in your physical body is going to reconnect with things that took place in your mind and in your experience. And you're physically going to come apart in a way that's unbelievable and worse than anything you've ever been through in your life, because it's going to be all those kinds of circumstances and horrible events come flooding in simultaneously a lot of times. And it is just unbelievably disabling. And so physically, if you don't have the resources financially to not work anymore, to not go out and have the normal kind of life, but to just, like, for a long time, you guys, I literally laid on the ground and cried in the fetal position and screamed. Like that was what my life looked like until my wife got home. And then I tried to act like I was okay. Like that was how my life functioned for a lot of the early stages of this. It was debilitating. And this is why survivors need so much support, heavy, intensive support in their early phases of this.
Going off of that, another question was, what does deprogramming and integrating look like for assassin parts? Are they more resistant than other parts to integrate?
Heck yeah. Super resistant. Because what the heck job do they have to do out here? Like what purpose, what the heck are we going to do out here? You know what I'm saying? Like it's not that nobody wants us. The people that want what we have are generally not the good guys. So that sucks. So what the heck do you do with your life? What do you do with all this? Like, I tried to become a mercenary for a little bit in there, like I'm tired of getting paid $12 an hour. Sucks. It's just stupid. I'm capable of much more. Like, I used to consult for people. That's what we called it, by the way. Consulting. This was the Jason terms. This was the legalese language that you have to work into your life to be able to process this. My consulting fees were 10 ounces of gold a day, like per diem. And then I'm supposed to stop doing that kind of stuff. And I'm supposed to go and get a job that pays me $12 an hour. And you're like, what the heck am I doing with my life? Meanwhile, you're watching other guys who are doing mercenary work and they're like, hey, I'm making $275,000 a year. And you're like, that sounds a whole lot better than doing this BS. Like, it's exhausting trying to work in the normal world. It's insidiously stupid. It's like designed obsolescence. It's like why you buy, like, I bought this battery for my camera and I'm like, hey, this should be great, right? It's advertised as 3.7 volts, 1600 milliamps, 5.9 watt hours. And in reality, it's about 700 milliamps. Like, it's designed to not be what it is. It's designed to break. So I'm going to have to buy another one. Like, this kind of stuff pisses me off. It makes me want to wage a campaign and a war against the company who put this product out here and falsified information. Like, my mind only ever works to just go ahead and unravel the mysteries of everybody's filthy work and ways. And it's like, how do you integrate a part of your soul that was raised to engage in criminal behaviors and to devour and destroy kingdoms? Like, I was made and was facilitating destruction of corporations and religious organization and cults. Like, I went after huge organizations. That was like what I was catered to do. And I'm very, very good at working my way in, finding out the necessary pertinent information. Where are the skeletons in people's closets? What is actually going on here? Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? And who are the dumb sheep that don't know any better? Like, how to identify and clearly evaluate what's going on in an organization to root out the wolves, to kill the serpents, and to make sure that the sheep are protected and guarded. Like, these were all the things I was made to do. And I just didn't know what to do with all of that. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll just go get a job as a mercenary. So one of my friends was like, hey, we're getting contracts to do high value asset transportation, meaning we're going to drive around people that are in witness protection programs and people that were going to testify at like court hearings and crime hearings. And so, I got all the kits and the tools and the resources to go ahead and do that. And the day I had my first transport, I went to test fire one of the firearms, a backup pistol, a double barreled 45, a very slim 45 barrel pistol. And the first time I fired it, it blew apart in my hand and sheared my saddle joints off on my right thumb and blew my joint apart. And so I lost the ability to use my right hand. And it literally stopped my whole endeavors towards that field and going back into that. I think it was an act of the Father in one sense to keep me from going back into that world. But like, you need to exercise the mind, especially as you're trying to get integration. Like, you need to get it out of you. You need to have some kind of purpose. You need a job. And you know what? The people that want to hire us are generally the worst people on the face of the earth. And their only intent is evil continually. And it's not until I had to see people fighting. Like, that's why I had to see Russ Dizzar. I had to see Dr. Michael. Like, I had to see people who had teeth bared fighting against this system to know, hey, I have a usefulness. I have a utility. I can add value to this society. Instead of only seeking ways of dismantling it, I can add value to it. And I can use these skill sets in order to advance a kingdom of truth and contend against this kingdom of deceit. And I just had to learn what were those tools to use, because as much as I want to use other tools, as badly as I want to go use a Winkler's knife to just go cut the throats of pedophiles for the rest of my life, as much as I want to do that, I understand that there is far more effective tools at setting the captives free when you use information as your tool, as using your lips and the sword of your mouth to fight your war. Like, because I wrote that book, I've been able to see people set free, see the people that would have been the agents of evil instead turn and come out of it and begin to dismantle that network. So assassins, in order for them to deprogram, for them to reintegrate, man, you better give them something better to fight for. At the end of the day, until you do that, screw you all. You all suck. Like, you do. Like, I'm not saying you, Emma. I'm saying the collective humankind species that people walk around and put on these skin suits and masquerade in. Like, they suck terribly. They're horribly awful to work with. They're dumb and they're meaningless. Like, I'm not saying that in some kind of offensive way. Like, they're clinically dumb. Like, they don't have a way of thinking for themselves. And when you operate at like tier 1 like tier one operators are the best of the best of the best. And then there's this whole other freak show category of people that are like savants, okay, inside that network. And you start to interact with those people and you're like, wow, I've been starved from being around intelligent people for so long. I'm so desperate to be around these people. And so you begin to get in these cliques like the Jason projects. You're like, I finally get to be around other guys who do what I do. Like, oh, this is the greatest relief of my life. Like I operated under this name, Joshua Killough, Killough. Like that was my call sign within these groups and these projects. My project title was Jason Project 7716. Like that was me as I was identified within those groups. And like, those were a band of brothers that I'd been waiting my whole life for. Like I was so alone. I was so trapped in the system of the Jesuit and the religious order side of this and the cult side of this for so long that by the time I started working with the military, I finally felt like I was around people that were brilliant, that had an ability to solve complex problems that nobody else even cared to think about. Like I was so bored all the time in school. I was so bored with my classmates. Like I was so bored of having to reduce down my I was so tired of slowing down enough to communicate to somebody something that was so idiotic and infantile. And I just wanted to be around other people that thought the way I did, that acted the way I did, that were exquisitely capable of engaging in a war that was in the shadows. Like I just wanted to be around them. And they used that as a very powerful manipulative tool to get me into the military, to be like, you're going to be a part of this brothers in arms and all the rest of this. You're going to have a unit that you're going to work with. And they called it the Lobos. And like, they were all these wolves, the lone wolf sleeper cell assassins, but they would collectively work together during these times, during the seasons. So they would gather up other Jasons and they were like, we're going to let you guys get together, but only for a couple of weeks because we don't want you guys to bond too much. We don't want you guys talking to each other. We want you guys still compartmentalized, but we understand that there's this value that's added to it. And so when I went to Fort Lee, Virginia in 2007, that was like the first time I was ever actually given a unit to like work with. That was the first time I got to be a part of other Jasons. And I got to actually be a part of a unit that was hunting, that had an actual intel package, that actually had like assets, ground assets, air assets, like that we actually had a full cadre of military armament to go after these people, to infiltrate and work our way into these pedophile groups and work our way into the trafficking groups and start to do targeted eliminations, assassinations on these people. Like I finally had what I had been waiting for my whole life, which was comrades in arms, like brothers in arms. Like I just finally had it. And then it literally was snuffed out in a couple of weeks because what they'd like to do in these projects is make one fighter fight another fighter. It's like the Hunger Games, you guys. They literally throw you in pits. Like they made me go into pits as a child and engage in fights to the death with bare hands, brass knuckles, knives, daggers, hammers, clubs, billiard cues. Like they literally film it for snuff films and they profiteer off of that. That's what they were doing in Flagstaff, Arizona. Like my family had pits outside of Mount Prescott. I call it Mount Prescott. I know other people call it Mount Humphreys, but they had literal warehouses and buildings with pits in the ground where they would film and videotape people that would come in and bet on children to fight each other to the death. And this was how they tested the Jasons. They tested you to see whether or not your combative systems that your handlers were doing was better than their combative systems that their handlers were doing. And they literally pitted us against each other. And so the only time I ever had like a close inkling of another Jason, of another like brother, was in those moments where I literally had to kill them. I had to fight them. I had to dismember them. I had to tear them apart. I had to rip their throats out with my teeth. Like I had to destroy my brothers. And it just was this constant destruction of my soul. Like, how do I get out of this? How do I stop this? Because I don't want to have to fight these people. But if we don't really fight each other, they're going to kill both of us. And it was like learned helplessness on an inexcusably painful scale. And so when I finally had that team, I was finally feeling like I was set free until they shoved me down at a team down at Fort Bragg and they made me do another one of their pit fights. And I just... like the cadre of the generals and the military leaders and like the head of the X projects at Fort Bragg and the Delta teams was like sitting in a room watching me fight one of their best fighters to see whether or not I was ready for their little team. And I was just so disgusted at it. I was so tired of everybody being duplicitous because they raised themselves up to me as like, you were the heroes, but they were sending me after one pedophile. They're like, here, you're going to go kill Mr. Blue. Mr. Blue is a guy who likes to peel the skin off of children and put their skin on his body and then sodomize him. They're like, you're going to let you go after him and kill him. Okay. But you're going to first capture him. You're going to exfiltrate him and bring him to us. We're going to torture him, extract information, and then you're going to be able to kill him because we know that's what you really like to do. You like to do the killing blows. We're going to make sure that you get that. Okay. But when I went into that estate and I infiltrated that estate, there were so many other people in this house that were doing the very same things. They had literally had bedrooms, like a hotel room of people going in and engaging in the same type of behavior. And they're like, you're allowed to take him out, but nobody else. And I just utterly detest that kind of stuff. I hate it when somebody says you're not allowed to actually eradicate the evil, that you're not allowed to cut the head off of the serpent and make sure the whole body dies. I hated that. And so when they made me go through another pit fight down at Fort Bragg, I was enraged because I knew that at the end of this, if I stay in this unit, if I keep going in this, I am always going to be somebody else's asset. And I just wanted to be free. I wanted to be free to make sure we could actually eradicate the system of evil. I didn't want somebody else overseeing me and telling me what I could and could not do. I wanted them to understand that I was the hand of vengeance on this earth. And I was here. All you need to do is let me loose and I could tear this whole entire thing apart. But nobody really would. And so during that meeting, I threatened the general that I would tear his throat out, which was not a good idea, you know? And it was over instantly, like instantly. They shut me off. They stripped me of my classification. They took it all away in like a moment. Like everything I'd worked for, everything I'd longed for was gone. My whole purpose in life. I had no backup. I didn't have a contingency plan for that. All my life had been engineering for that moment and being able to finally have the team of brothers to fight. And it was gone. And I had it for long enough to value it and to be grateful for it and to feel like we could finally win. And then it was over. And I was so crushed. I was so devastated. They washed me out of the military with an honorable medical discharge and they shut me down and they took all of it away and they left me out here to starve. You know, they took away all of my communications equipment. They took away all my weapons. They took away all of my means of communicating with my brothers. And they're like, you're no longer ours. And they shut me down and they took away everything from me. And they shoved me on so many drugs and they did everything they could to try to get me to kill myself. Because that's how they wash these people out. And it's just awful. This is the part of it where you don't want anybody to see it, you know, that you failed. But I sure felt like a failure the day I got my DD-214 and my discharge papers from the military. And you're sitting there and I'm like, I waited my whole life for this. And like, now what do I do? Like, what am I here for? I wanted a mission. And they wouldn't give me any more after that, you know? Nobody would touch me with a long 10-foot pole because I was a lone wolf now. I was a freelance agent. They're like, what do you do with that guy? He's dangerous. Don't touch him. Leave him alone. And they killed my best friend. They killed my battle buddy and my roommate, Grimmel. They murdered him in Afghanistan because he was in there with me. And I had to watch as they systemically killed all the other brothers that were part of my team. And I could do nothing about it. And I was just devastated. I was devastated. I didn't know who I was or what I was going to do with myself. And so I just wandered around the halls of this academia, like looking for a purpose, looking for a way to heal myself, looking for a way to heal others. Meanwhile, my family was just committed and hell-bent on getting me back operational so they could profit off me again. But I was old enough to understand that all that I ever found in those death cults was liars and thieves and murderers, and I didn't want anything to do with it. And this is literally the time in my life where I went back to the scriptures. I went back to the ancient path, and I just wanted a new foundation. If nobody else could give me identity, I wanted the Father to give me my identity. I realized that there was only one source of truth, and there was one who made me. He's the only one who knows who I am and what I was made for. And he's the only one who could give me that purpose, give me that mission. I needed a captain of the heavenly host. I needed a commander that was not corrupt. And I've never found that on this earth. I've never found that on this earth. I've only found it in him and living the way he said to. And because I started turning back to him, I met my wife and I got started on this process of coming into freedom. And you know what? This is why I'm out here, because at the end of the day, I don't care about a lot of these people that are around me. Like, I'm looking for my brothers. That's it. At the end of the day, I'm waiting for them. I'm waiting for them to know that they can get out. I'm waiting for them to see that there's still a mission out here, that we still have a job to do, which is to defeat the kingdom of darkness, which is to cut the head of the dragon off, like to fight continually against them day and night, to resist, to say, I do not consent. and to inspire generations to rise up, to inspire them to know that there are still men, there's still warriors who are not cowards, who are not corrupt. So how do you integrate an assassin? There you go. You don't. You just give them a job to do and get out heck out of their way.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Nathan. One of the things that I think is really interesting about your story, and this question wasn't on the list, but I think it goes along a little bit with what you were just talking about. You had a different type of brotherhood that you grew up with also in a non-human form with wolves. And I have one more question after that, but I wanted to bring that up because I think that that's also something really fascinating about you that I haven't really heard you talk about. And I think it's a really special part of your story because this was a part of you and a part of bonding, something that you had that meant a lot to you.
I wasn't necessarily like, I learned to survive by going outside really quick. I learned that people were not trustworthy, that people were duplicitous. And so from my earliest formative experiential memories of working with mankind, with humans, was that they are beasts, that they have ulterior motives all the time, and you can't trust them. And so I would go outside. It's my earliest memories is fleeing into the darkness, is going out at night and trying to get out and trying to stay alive and trying to get away from this. And I found I would seek shelter. I would seek shelter, and I would seek caves, and I would seek tunnels, and I would try to find places to live and to find food. And I would be gone for long periods of time trying to survive. And it made me, people call this feral child syndrome, where children that are outside of that are away from normal human experiences for too long, you get raised by animals. And I know this is really strange stuff, but like I crawled into dens with animals, specifically dogs and wolves. And I found safety in a pack. I found a way of communicating and interacting with them at a very young age, to where I bonded with them more than I ever bonded with people. And it created a relationship with dogs, with canines, that was very deep and very strong. And I have a way of interacting with them because of that that's different. And they sustained me, and they kept me warm and nourished, and they taught me how to hunt, and they taught me a way of living and surviving in a world with monsters. And I learned how to think like a wolf. I learned how to be like a wolf. I learned how to devour my prey. Like, I learned how to live and survive because of wolves, not people. And this is what got me recruited into this stuff. It's because they saw this creature out there in the night, and they wanted to exploit me instead of rehabilitate me. It ruined me. They should have just left me out there. You know what I mean? I didn't want to go back into human society and integrate back in. I didn't want to be with them. I just wanted to stay with the wolves. And there's this like raping of the mind when they try to separate you from your pack and separate you from everyone that's been with you. They took me away from my pack, and so I just would always bond with dogs anywhere I went. And my family had a black lab. When I moved to Arizona, we got a black lab and a golden retriever mutt mix. And at night, when I would go and do these rituals and do these projects and do these killings, I would come back and I would live in their dog loos with them. And I've always just gone to the animals, you guys. At the end of the day, it's just the best way to say it. Like, I'd rather just be with animals. I don't want to be with people anymore. I don't want to. I just want to go be with horses. I want to just go into the wilderness. I don't want to have to do all this. I don't want to have to do all of this anymore. Like, it's really hard for me to be a father. It's really hard for me to be a husband. It's really hard for me to be a person. I just would rather go to the wilderness again. I want to be alone. I don't want to have relationships because I know that they're messy. I know people they're people, there's still good people out there. I know there's wonderful people out there, but I don't have any capacity at the true root of me. I don't have a capacity for connecting with people like others do. And so it made it easier for me to kill. It made it a lot easier for me to kill very intimately, because I began killing very intimately with my teeth. I began killing very intimately with my hands and my fingernails, like very early on. And so to me, it was very normal. And this is why I had such a predilection for it and had a great ability at infiltrating, because I knew how to crawl and be like an animal. And I used to wear skins and hides and imitate dog calls as a way of infiltrating a lot of these properties and estates. And a lot of this got deepened way more intensely when I go up to that farm in Michigan, and they had wolves and they had F1s, which are a hybrid of 50% wolf, 50% dog, domesticated dog, gray wolf, and a red wolves. And these were animals that are used as sentinels on properties. And so I had ability to get past them, and I had an ability to get around them and navigate around them, even though they were trained not to allow that happen. And it was a time in my life that I deeply miss, and long for I would long for rehabilitation with. I even back in 2007, I went on a project when I was at Fort Knox, Kentucky, for my basic combat training. I got flown over from there with the 160th, which is like the Night Stalkers, and we went to a property in Tennessee, or basically on the border of Tennessee and Kentucky, near Fort Campbell, and they had this like farm set up, like a maze set up, in this field, like hunter's field, and there was this guy who had a wolf, and he would like run gauntlets and stuff, and it was the first time I'd seen a wolf in so long, and it just, like, there's guys, they're literally called lone wolves, you guys, because a lot of us literally bond with wolves. Like, we actually are raised like wolves. We think we're wolves at like our core identity. Like, a lot of us are, I know it sounds insane, you guys, but like, we're feral people. We are literally raised by animals. Like, there's people that are animals inside, and then there's animals on the outside that are more people like than the other way around. Like, it's a really strange thing, and I understand it to the waking world. This is in crazy stuff, but it's real life. When you're trying to survive, it's safer to be around animals than it is to be around people. When your parents are prostituting you around, you learn really quickly that it's better to live with mud on your back than it is to live with another man on your back. Like, you find a way to survive. And these guys literally turn to animals, and they raise wolves, they raise predators, lions, they raise these animals. And one of these guys had a wolf on his property, and it was the first time I'd seen one in a long time. And it finally gave me this hope that a man could work with his wolf again. And like, that's always been one of the deepest dreams of my life, is to be able to see these guys get healing. Like, a lot of what I'm passionate about and talking about is trying to get people back into the wilderness. It's because where I started healing, y'all, where I started integrating, getting deliverance, was at a wilderness camp that I became a wilderness mentor. It was called Gold Lake. It was one of the most beautiful places in the world. It's like where I healed the very beginning. It was the largest natural spring-fed lake in Colorado, Boulder County. It was a beautiful place. There was no technology. Like, I finally got to become me again. Like, I got to be out there with the eagles. I got to be out there exploring caves and going in these cavern systems and doing the dangerous stuff I like to do. Like, I got to go and be in the wilderness. And it helped me heal so much. And I've seen more effectiveness in healing and in trauma rehabilitation by people being in nature than any other modality I've ever seen. Like, I've been trying to find ways of healing myself and healing others since the day I was born. And I've never found a more effective method to do that than getting people outside, than getting people around creation, than getting people around animals. There's a reason why equestrian therapy is so incredibly powerful, because horses are just so powerful communicators and understanders of people, and animals likewise. Canines were made to interact with them in a very distinct way. And there's programs out there, and I long to be able to experience some of them, that do rehabilitation with wolves and people that are combat veterans, is because they are what we are. We are them, and we're made to work together. So that's why I have that connection there.
So true, though. Animals are so healing. And something I've heard from survivors is one of the ways that they learned how to trust people after they awakened to their abuse was seeing people interact positively with animals and knowing, well, if the animal trusts that person, then that person has to be trustworthy.
Yeah.
So animals can be a really, healing on all different levels. And I think that that's a really fascinating part of your story. Now, going off of what you said, the last question that I have, and you sort of primed it perfectly. Why is there still good news for people who think they are beyond saving?
You fundamentally can't live without hope. At the end of the day, if you give up, you're going to die. You can quit anytime you want, y'all. You can quit anytime you want. But you gotta remember there's always hope. It's the one thing they couldn't get out of me. No matter all that I've been through, like there was always that burning light in me of I just you can't extinguish you can't kill someone's convictions. You can't. You can try to corrupt them, you can try to control them, but you can't kill someone's convictions. And I was absolutely convicted. I was convicted with this truth that I was made for a purpose, and my purpose was yet to be realized. That I did not survive all of this to die a meaningless death. If you're alive, you have all the reason you will ever need to know that you still have hope. Because if not, you'd be dead. You would have gone long ago. But you know what? You guys have been, you gals too. You've been through more than people can comprehend. Survivors are the most important people on the face of the earth. Like there's 10 million students who have gone through the Jason projects. Like 10 million of it. That's just the children's side of this. Like there's 10 million of them out there. Like there are so many people who are survivors of systemic abuse. There's so many people who have been shattered and split and fragmented. There's so many of us out there. And you have to understand that if you are still alive today, if you're 5 years old or you're 95 years old, if you are still alive, you have a destiny that's yet to be realized. And that destiny is the very key that we need to unlock the shackles of slavery that so many people are in bondage to. We were made to be able to help people come out of their cages of cowardice. That is why we are here. And the way we do that is with the one single characteristic trait that separates us from them, and that's boldness. Boldness is the single greatest characteristic that comes from being a set apart person, because he will clothe you with dynamite power from on high. When you choose as an act of your will to say no to this kingdom of corruption, and you choose instead to say yes to the kingdom of authentic living, when you choose that, when you make that decision, you literally separate yourself. It's like a divorce. It's like a nulling of a covenant. It's like a cutting of that cord, that spiritual cord, to those spirits of deceit and doubt and despair. And it's instead you get clothed with the spirit of truth that allows you to think in a way that no mind can understand. It will bring to remembrance everything you need to know. Like it's the true spirit. It's like the real set apart spirit, the Holy Spirit, but not the version of it that churchianity smeared and smashed and smorgasbord. Like I'm talking about it, the real presence, the breath, the life, the nourishing, sustaining wisdom that comes from above. That's not earthly and carnal, like true wisdom to overcome the foolishness of all of this system. That is what's waiting for people. That's like life, true life. If you had told me 7 years ago, I'd be living in a barn in Missouri with 4 children, still alive, speaking about this, having lived as a farmer, agriculturist, chef. Like I have lived more life in the last 5 years than I could have ever imagined. We sold our house and traveled for 4.5 years in an RV, 150,000 miles. I've got to see people, like real people. There's beautiful people. Like I finally found the greatest treasure. I've been on this treasure hunt my whole life. Like all these little gemstones and sapphires and seashells and weapons and bullets and like these are all the treasures. I'm a natural treasure hunter. All I want to do is find the greatest treasures on the earth. It's like it sings to me. I want to find the greatest treasures, and I found them in people. I found people are the greatest treasure on the earth. They really are. And you know what? I know that they look like they're meaningless and monotonous and they're stupid, but you know what? When you get them inspired, when you give them the nutrition, like when you give them the truth, they become so powerful. They become your co-laborers. They are the battle buddies we've all been looking for. Like my wife is worth 1,000 of those brothers. She's worth more to me than all of the gold and the silver that they offered me. Like that woman is precious to me. I can't say I love her unconditionally. I can't say I still even have at the deepest core of myself a love connection with her that should be there, because I'm still not capable But that woman has shown me consistency. She's shown me love, like true love. It exists and it defeats this kingdom instantly. Love is what conquers and covers a multitude of evil. Love is what destroys that kingdom of darkness, because that is the one thing that has always been burning within me, is that there is true love out there, and it's available to those of you, any of you, no matter what you've been through, no matter what you've done or what's been done to you. You are loved, you are cherished, you are adored, you have a meaning and a destiny on this earth that is greater than anything you could ever comprehend or imagine. I could have never imagined the wonders of what was waiting for me on the other side of the day when I picked up my sword. When I put this one down, this used to be a little toolkit that I carried around my swords in. When I put down this one, when I put down this knife and I started using this one instead, my entire life took on a meaning that was better and more satisfying, because this brought me temporary relief. This stopped bad guys temporarily. But this one, with this pen, I have been able to wage a war that will live on for eternity. My life, my weapon of my warfare is my testimony. It says the enemy, the dragon, that devil of old, is defeated by the blood of the Lamb, the words of our testimony, and not loving our life even when faced with death. We are not to go quietly into the night. We are supposed to fight no matter what the cost is, because you know what? To do anything otherwise would be to quit. And none of you were made to be quitters. You are braver than anybody I've ever known in my life. So thank you to each and every one of you who has helped to co-labor with me, who has supported my wife and my family, who has sustained us and fed us and clothed us and sheltered us and harbored us as spies in the land. It's because you guys are out there bravely contending against this darkness, lighting up those fires of freedom for so many others, that we're still here. We need each other, and we need to work together in order to dismantle this empire of evil.
Amen to that. There was a quote I read before, and I can't remember it verbatim, but it said something about your testimony exists when you pass the test, and only when you pass the test. And that's exactly what you did, Nathan, and what you're helping so many people do is pass that test so they can have that finished piece of paper and say, this is my story. And whether I share it or not, and I know that there's a time and a place for that. Being able to just have that and find that power in it is so beautiful. And I'm so grateful that there's people like you helping people realize that within themselves, and to find purpose and all the pain that they've gone through, and to be able to come out the other side with the same hope that you have, and even if it's an imperfect hope. And I appreciate you being so vulnerable and truthful about it, because I get that a lot, where people reach out and they say, gosh, these people seem so put together and I don't, and it's like, there's so many different stages to this, and it's so much deeper than just waking up one day and you're fully healed, and you exemplify that by sharing the struggles and what you still struggle with, but also the beauty that lies with every step, that it's not this perfect situation where it's just all fixed one day, that every step adds up, and it's a slow journey, but every single step brings you one step closer. And even if it doesn't feel like a lot, even if it's just a couple inches that you're stepping, you're still moving forward, and all of that adds up over the test of time. So I just want to thank you. You've been such an inspiration for me. Everybody on my channel just loves you, and everybody that you touch feels your presence and is changed after hearing you speak. And all of this, I know, is really hard to talk about. This is just hard in general, but it's so important for people to hear this, whether you're an advocate and you've never gone through it, or whether you're a survivor and you've gone through something similar, to know that there is hope, that you can have love, and that's more powerful than any weapon that you can hold, and that your story is so important, and that it's not just this wasted life, and that you have the opportunity now to take your story and do what Nathan and others are doing, and empower other people to be emancipated, and to take your own story and your own testimony and say, what beauty can I create from this and give to others? What can I create in this world from this that's that's beautiful, and that's going to help people come out on the other side. So I just want to thank you for coming on today, Nathan. It's always an honor getting to talk to you, and you're just such a powerful, eloquent, brilliant speaker, and you bring so much hope to people listening on the other side.
Thanks for being brave enough to do this. We need those people out there fighting for us, and we need advocates, like you said. That's all we need sometimes. Like, there's one chapter of, man, if just a girl named Suze was a 13-year-old girl that showed me that love on a school bus and just didn't run away from me, wasn't scared of me. She had that authority, that calm. She was that set apart girl. She just had a conviction in her that was just totally different. She planted a seed of love in there, and that's what y'all are here for. It's a miracle that everyone is living and active and doing anything to contend against this. And every one of you who is willing to wade into the fray with us, I just thank you. We need every one of you to help in any way, shape, or form that you can. Every one of you has different skill sets, different talents, different abilities, and you're all needed. And your raw brokenness is also very needed. And I know it's hard because a lot of times it's not logical for a good long season in there. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's very confusing and it's really hard. And you know what? I'm not always so put together, ask my wife. Yikes. But you know what? We're making our steps forward every single day, Emma. And I thank you for being willing to help to pave a path for us to get ourselves home.
It's my honor, Nathan. And I know we didn't get through the full list. We got through a good chunk of it. But obviously I'd love to have you back on and we can chip away at some more of it. I know that there's definitely, with all the responses that I got, I know that there's people that really, really want to learn from you. So we'll do another episode. But in the meantime, where can people find you? Where are you at on social media, and how can people connect with you?
Yeah, they can find me at snatchedfromtheflames.com. If anybody want to reach out to me, talk with me, whatever, you can go to snatchedfromtheflames at protonmail.com is my email. And I also have a YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Nathan Reynolds. We've got a couple hundred videos on there, playlists and audio scriptures. I did a recording in the entirety of the audio scriptures because most people don't know what the Bible says because they never read it for themselves from beginning to end in the order it was written. It's pertinent information, and you can test it out for yourselves. I did that recording on there. My audiobook, my ebooks, all on there. I also am on TikTok at Snatched from the Flames. And I've got Spreaker and Rumble, all that other stuff too. I've got a lot of that. It's there through my website if you guys want to find the different places to connect and follow up with me. That's the best places to do it.
And I'm just going to bring up your website really quick while I say this next part. And I want to remind you guys listening that you can go to Nathan's website, and as he said, you can get the free version of his book. You can purchase it, which I do encourage you guys to do. Every dollar. And his book is so affordable, and it's thick. Like, it's a good sized book, you guys. You get a lot with it. There's so many lessons, his full testimony, and there's so many beautiful revelations with his journey with God and redemption that I encourage you all to dive into. And I'd love you guys to join our book club. Nathan's book will be the one, like how I said in the intro, that we're featuring. So I would really love for you guys to go give him a boost this month, to go support him. But again, if you can't afford it, you can go on his website, or like he said, you can go to his YouTube page, and he literally has a playlist if you go on his channel where he chapter by chapter reads the book for you for free. And you can also access that from his website. So please pour your money and resources into actual survivors instead of, third-party nonprofits. It does wonders for people like Nathan who, there's never going to be a job created. I don't want to say never because you're creating it, but the government's never going to offer somebody like Nathan a job to do what he's doing. So we need to be the ones to help create that, and to show the enemy that we have eyes on Nathan, that we support him, and that the work that he's doing matters, which it does. So I encourage you guys to do that. You can find the link below in the show notes for the book club, as well as all of Nathan's links. I'm going to have them all linked. On the link for the book club, it'll have all of his information to purchase his book there as well, and a Zoom link for you guys to save into your calendar for October 30th at 8 p.m. Central Time. So we're really, really excited about that, and to dive into Nathan's book. And again, you guys are going to get some one-on-one time with him. in a private group call, which will be really special too in October. So Nathan, thank you again so much for coming on. I'm so grateful for you. God bless all of you listening, and we will see you next time.